My name is Estelle Monroe. I'm 30 years old, and if you had asked me that night what I was about to lose, I would have said nothing. Because from the outside, it looked like I had already lost enough. Grief does that to you. It rearranges your sense of scale, makes everything feel distant, manageable, until it isn't. I had left my son with my boyfriend's family for 3 days. 3 days. Just long enough to attend my father's funeral. Just long enough to say goodbye to the only person who had ever truly understood me without needing an explanation. When I came back, I didn't even make it past the porch. I rang the doorbell once. Inside, I heard movement, footsteps, quick and deliberate. The low murmur of the television cut off mid-sentence. Silence followed, thick and unnatural. Then the deadbolt turned. But the door didn't open. Instead, her voice came through the wood.
Cold. Calm. Certain.
"We are protecting him from you." I froze. For a second, I thought I had misheard her. "Open the door," I said, my voice tighter than I expected. "This isn't funny. You will never see him again." No hesitation, no anger, just certainty. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Through the narrow window beside the door, I saw movement. A curtain being pulled back just enough to reveal a small face. My son. Confused.
Searching.
"Mom?" I heard faintly. My heart slammed so hard, it felt like my ribs might crack under the pressure. "What are you doing?" I demanded, stepping closer to the door. "Give him to me, now." "You left him," she replied evenly. "You're unstable, grieving, emotional. We won't let you damage him." "We." That word landed harder than anything else. Not I. We. Which meant, of course, my boyfriend. Ethan. He had to be inside. And suddenly, everything started rearranging itself in my mind. The questions they had been asking over the past few weeks, my schedule, how often my son stayed with them, whether I ever felt overwhelmed. At the time, it had felt like concern. Now, I saw it clearly. It had been preparation. "You can't do this," I said, quieter now. "We already have." There was a pause, just long enough for the meaning to settle in. "We've spoken to a lawyer," she added. Everything. That's what she meant. They had been building something, quietly, carefully. And in that moment, I understood something terrifying. If I screamed, they would call the police and say I was hysterical. If I forced my way in, they would say I was violent. If I broke down, they would use it. So I didn't. I stepped back. Slowly. I looked at the house, the curtains closing, the door that used to open without question now sealed like I was a stranger. They thought I would panic. They were wrong. I walked to my car, got inside, and closed the door gently. My hands were shaking. But my voice wasn't when I made the call. "They've taken him," I said.
Silence.
Then my brother's voice came through, low and controlled. "Stay there." Something in his tone steadied me immediately. "Do not react," he continued. "Let them think they're in control." I looked back at the house. They believed I had just lost. They didn't realize they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. I didn't leave. That's what they expected. That I would drive away, crying, defeated. Instead, I parked across the street. And I waited. My brother arrived 20 minutes later. He didn't rush toward the porch. He didn't pound on the door. He didn't shout Ethan's name into the quiet street. He stepped out of his car like a man walking into a courtroom he already intended to win. "Tell me everything," he said. So I did. The lock, the words, the threat, the lawyer, the calmness in Ethan's mother's voice. He didn't look surprised. "They've been preparing this," he said. "This isn't emotional. It's strategic." Then he asked one question that made my stomach drop. "Did you ever sign anything for them? Temporary guardianship, medical consent, school pickup authorization?" My mind raced. 3 months earlier, Ethan's mother had insisted she needed written permission to pick my son up from school, just in case. I had signed a simple form. Nothing official, I thought, but my brother's jaw tightened. "Do you still have a copy?" I shook my head. He exhaled slowly. Then we assumed the worst. Across the street, the front door opened briefly. Ethan stepped out. He didn't see us at first. He looked relaxed. Too relaxed. Like a man who believed everything had already been handled. Then he noticed my car. Our eyes met. He didn't look guilty. He smiled. That was when I knew this wasn't fear. It wasn't protection. It was replacement. My brother touched my arm lightly. "Do not react." Ethan walked back inside. "They'll try to provoke you," my brother said. "They want you emotional, angry, unstable. That's how they justify this." "So what do we do?" I asked. "We document everything." He took out his phone and started recording from across the street. "First, refusal of access. Second, we call the police, not to fight, but to create a report." "Will they make them open the door?" "No," he said honestly. "But it forces them to state their position officially." 10 minutes later, a police car pulled up. Ethan's mother opened the door immediately. Of course she did. She looked composed, concerned, almost fragile. I watched her body language shift into performance mode. She had rehearsed this. The officers spoke to her first, then Ethan, then they walked over to us. "She says you've been unstable," one officer said carefully. "That you've had emotional outbursts recently." "I just buried my father," I said. He nodded. "They're also claiming the child expressed fear." Fear. The word nearly split me open. My brother stepped in calmly. "My sister has full legal custody. There is no court order restricting her rights. We'd like that documented." The officer wrote something down. "Without a court order, they can't legally keep him from you," he said. "But if the child refuses to leave, it becomes complicated."
Complicated.
That was the word they were counting on. The police knocked again. This time, my son appeared in the doorway. He looked confused. Not terrified, not abused, not afraid. Just confused. And then I saw Ethan's mother's hand on his shoulder. Not comforting.
Controlling.
The officer knelt slightly. "Do you want to go with your mom?" My son looked at me, then at her, then at Ethan standing behind them, arms crossed. "I can stay here," he whispered. That single sentence hurt more than the locked door. Not because he didn't love me, because he didn't understand what was happening. And they had made sure of that. I knelt down until I was eye level with him. "Did I ever leave you?" I asked softly. He shook his head. "Did I ever hurt you?" "No." Ethan's mother tightened her grip. "Sweetheart," she interrupted smoothly, "remember what we talked about?" I stood slowly. There it was. The first crack. My brother stepped closer. "Officer, please note that coaching language was just used." The officer wrote again. For the first time, Ethan's expression flickered. I leaned toward my son. "I'm not going anywhere," I told him. "I love you, and I will see you very soon." His face changed.
Relief.
not fear.
Relief.
That told me everything. They hadn't convinced him I was dangerous. They had only confused him. There was a difference. The police left after documenting the situation. The door closed again. Slowly.
Deliberately.
Back in the car, my brother exhaled. "They've built a narrative," he said, "but they made a mistake." What mistake? They started too early. He explained it like he was dissecting a case. If they truly had proof of neglect or abuse, they would have filed for emergency custody before locking you out. The fact that they're relying on verbal claims means they're fishing. So they don't have anything? They have something, he corrected, but not enough. My stomach tightened. What could they possibly use? He looked at me carefully. "Have you posted anything recently? Anything emotional?" 3 nights earlier, after the funeral, I had posted one sentence. "I don't know how much more I can carry." It was about grief. But out of context, it could become something else. "They'll paint you as unstable," he said quietly. "Overwhelmed. Mentally fragile." I gripped the steering wheel. They planned this while my father was dying. He didn't deny it. Then his phone buzzed. He looked down. His expression changed. "What?" I demanded. "It's from someone at the courthouse." My pulse spiked. "They filed an emergency motion," he said slowly. "When?" 2 hours ago. 2 hours before I even rang the doorbell. They had never planned to let me in. They're requesting temporary custody based on concerns for the child's emotional safety. I stared at the house across the street. Lights on. Curtains closed. A family probably sitting inside, as if I had already been erased. Something inside me sharpened. "They think grief makes me weak," I whispered. My brother looked at me. "What are you going to do?" I turned the engine on. "I'm going to show them exactly who they decided to fight." Because they had just escalated this. And now, I was done being careful. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the next morning. They thought speed would corner me. They didn't expect that my brother had already pulled every file tied to my name before midnight. I didn't sleep. Not really. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, the glow of the screen reflecting in a cup of coffee that went cold hours before I noticed. My son's empty chair across from me felt heavier than anything else in that room. Grief had been sitting quietly inside me for days. Now it had somewhere to go. Into focus. Into clarity. Into something sharper. I went through everything I had ignored. Bank records, phone logs, school emails, calendar entries. Small details that hadn't mattered before, but now, suddenly, they did. Patterns started forming. Conversations that felt too timed, questions that had felt too specific, moments where Ethan had seemed distant. Not cruel, not cold, just observant. Like he was waiting for something. Or someone. When we walked into the courthouse the next morning, Ethan looked confident. That was the first thing I noticed. Not nervous, not defensive.
Confident.
His new wife sat behind him, hands folded neatly in her lap, her gaze lowered just enough to suggest humility, but not enough to hide awareness. She didn't look uncomfortable. She looked prepared. Ethan's mother wore soft colors, something almost pastel, gentle, non-threatening. The kind of outfit you wear when you want to be seen as safe, as trustworthy, as someone who would never hurt a child. They had built a version of me in their minds, and they had dressed themselves to contrast it. The judge began with their claim. Ethan's mother spoke first. "She's been overwhelmed," she said, her voice carefully measured. "She cries constantly. She posted concerning messages online. The child has expressed fear of her emotional volatility."
Emotional volatility.
Ethan repeated it. "She left him for days." "For my father's funeral," I said calmly. The judge nodded for me to continue. I stood up slowly. "I would like the court to review something." My brother stepped forward, placing a folder on the table. I watched Ethan's expression for the first time shift, just slightly, as the judge opened it. Inside were printed messages.
Conversations.
Not between strangers. Between Ethan and his mother. They had forgotten one thing: shared access. Months ago, when things had still been normal, Ethan had logged into his email on my old laptop. He had never logged out. And I had never thought to check. Until last night. The judge read silently. Then again. The room changed. You could feel it. Because the words on those pages didn't suggest concern. They revealed strategy. "She's exhausted. This is our window." The judge's eyes moved slower now. "If she breaks down publicly, we file immediately. We'll say the boy feels unsafe." I watched the color drain from Ethan's mother's face. Ethan shifted in his seat. "That's taken out of context," he said quickly. But the judge didn't respond. She turned the page. Another message. "If we secure temporary custody first, it becomes permanent. She won't recover in time."
Permanent.
That word settled into the room like a weight no one could lift. The judge looked up. "Explain this." Silence. Heavy. Measured. Ethan opened his mouth. Closed it. Tried again. "It's misinterpreted." But there was nothing to interpret. It was clear. Too clear. "You filed an emergency motion before the mother even returned from her father's funeral," the judge said sharply. "That indicates premeditation." Ethan's mother tried to speak. "We were only thinking of the child." "No," the judge interrupted. "You were thinking strategically." That word again.
Strategically.
The same word my brother had used. The emergency motion was denied. Immediate reunification was ordered. Just like that. But it didn't feel like a victory. Not yet. Because as we stepped out of the courtroom, my brother leaned closer. "They're not done," he said quietly. "How do you know?" "Because people who plan like this don't stop after one failure." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I could feel it. The way Ethan's new wife stood slightly apart from the others, her phone already in her hand, whispering something low and urgent. The way her eyes met mine, not with panic, but with calculation. They had lost the first move, but they were already thinking about the next one. I got my son back that evening. He ran toward me in the courthouse hallway and wrapped his arms around my waist so tightly I could barely breathe. "I didn't know what was happening," he whispered. "I know," I said. And I did. He hadn't been afraid of me. He had been afraid of choosing. That was the difference. That night, he slept in my bed, one hand gripping my sleeve like he was afraid I might disappear again. I should have felt relief. I should have felt like it was over. Instead, I felt watched. Because my brother was right. People who calculate like that don't stop. They adjust. They wait. They try again. 2 days later, I found out why. And when I did, everything finally made sense. 2 days later, a letter arrived. I almost ignored it. It sat on the kitchen counter, tucked between unopened mail and a half-empty glass of water I didn't remember pouring. My son was in the living room, building something quietly with his hands, the soft clicking of plastic pieces the only sound in the apartment. It looked ordinary, until I saw his name on it. My stomach tightened. I opened it slowly. It was from my father's attorney, and within seconds, the entire world shifted again. My father hadn't just left memories behind. He had left a trust. Not to me, to my son. I read the details once. Then again. Property shares, land that had recently been rezoned for development, investments I had never heard him mention, numbers that didn't feel real at first glance. It was substantial, enough to change a life, enough to make someone desperate. My hands went cold. Because suddenly, the timeline made sense. 6 weeks before my father died, they had started asking questions. Right after his condition became serious, they had known, or at least suspected. And if Ethan gained custody, he wouldn't just have access to our son, he would have control.
Control over the trust. Control over everything.
This had never been about protection.
Not really.
It wasn't about grief. It wasn't about stability. It was about leverage. I picked up my phone and called my brother. He answered immediately. "That explains the urgency," he said after I told him everything. "So temporary custody would have given them what?" I asked. "Administrative leverage," he replied. "Control over how the trust is managed until your son turns 18. I closed my eyes. They were trying to take my child for money. Yes. No hesitation. No softening. And they're not finished," he added. "If they can't get custody, they'll try something else. Challenge the trust, push for oversight, create pressure." That same evening, my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "We need to discuss financial transparency for our son's future." Not an apology. Not regret. A negotiation. I didn't answer. Instead, the next morning, I drove to my father's hometown. I met with his attorney face to face. And I made a decision. "I want to modify the trust," I said. He looked at me carefully. "In what way?" "A clause," I replied. "If either parent attempts to interfere with custody or files bad faith litigation for financial gain, they lose all administrative access. Permanently." He raised an eyebrow. "That's a serious condition." "I'm serious," I said, because now I understood the game. And I was done playing it defensively. When the updated documents were filed, formal notice was sent. Ethan called within minutes. "What did you do?" he demanded. I stood in the kitchen, watching my son laugh softly at something only he understood. "I protected him." "You're overreacting." "No," I said calmly. "I'm finishing what you started." There was a pause. Then his voice changed.
Colder. Sharper.
"You think this is over?" I looked at my son again. "No," I said. "I think it just became very simple." That's when he made his final mistake. He pushed. Harder. And this time, he didn't realize I was ready. The next message wasn't careful. It wasn't calculated. It was a threat. "If I can't access that trust through custody, I'll make sure you drown in legal fees." I stared at the screen, then slowly pressed record on my phone. "Say that again," I said when he called. "You heard me," he snapped. "You'll regret this." Not concern. Not love.
Leverage.
That single sentence changed everything. Within 48 hours, my brother filed for sole legal custody. Not because of what had happened at the house, but because of what it revealed.
A pattern.
Premeditation. Manipulation. Financial motivation tied directly to custody. We submitted everything. The messages. The emergency motion timing. The trust documents. The recorded threat. And something else. A statement from my son's school counselor. After everything, he had asked to speak to someone privately. And what he said was simple. Grandma said if I go with Mom, Dad will lose something important. I felt my chest tighten when I read it. Lose something important. They had made him feel responsible. That was the line they should never have crossed. The final hearing was quiet. No performance this time. No soft colors. No fragile smiles. Just silence. The judge reviewed everything slowly,
Carefully.
Then she looked at Ethan. One question, she said. Is there any evidence that your actions were motivated purely by the child's welfare and not financial interest? He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Temporary custody requests were dismissed with prejudice. Ethan was ordered into supervised visitation,
Pending psychological evaluation.
His mother was restricted from unsupervised contact, and I was granted sole legal custody. Just like that. But I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clear. 3 months later, we moved. Not far enough to disappear, just far enough to breathe. A different part of the city, a place where silence didn't feel like tension. Before we left, Ethan asked to see our son one last time without supervision. No, I said. Not out of anger. Out of memory. Because I would never forget the sound of that deadbolt locking from the inside. The curtain closing. The hesitation in my son's voice. Some doors, once closed like that, don't get reopened. As we drove away for the last time, my son looked at me. Are they mad at us? He asked. I glanced at him, then back at the road. No, I said gently. They're just not in control anymore. He nodded.
Satisfied.
And in that moment, I realized something important. They tried to take my child, but what they actually did was expose themselves. My name is Genevieve Laurent. I'm 30 years old, and if you had asked me that morning what I was preparing for, I would have said Thanksgiving. A normal one. A peaceful one. The kind where you show up, smile, and pretend everything is fine, even when it hasn't been for years. The message came while I was folding laundry. No greeting, no explanation. Just one sentence from my mother that made my hands stop mid-fold. We're celebrating Thanksgiving only with children who behave well. Yours can skip it this year. I read it once, then again, and then a third time, like maybe the meaning would soften if I stared at it long enough. It didn't. It just sat there. Cold. Final. Like it had been rehearsed. Eva was sitting on the floor beside me, cross-legged, completely absorbed in her little world. She was cutting out paper leaves for a thankful tree her class was making. Each leaf had something written on it in her careful, slightly uneven handwriting. She held one up to me with a bright smile. I wrote Grandma's cookies, she said. That's when she noticed my face. The smile faded, just slightly. She tilted her head, studying me the way children do when they sense something's wrong before anyone says it out loud. Is Grandma coming for Thanksgiving? She asked. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out at first. Then I said, no. I don't even remember deciding to do it, but I turned the phone toward her and let her read the message. She didn't react immediately. She just stared at the screen, her eyes moving slowly across each word. Then she looked up at me. Did I do something wrong? There it was. That question. The one that breaks something in you, no matter how many times you hear it. Before I could answer, her eyes filled. Not loud crying. Not dramatic. Just quiet, contained tears, like she was trying not to be difficult about it. Like even her sadness needed permission. That was the moment something shifted inside me. It wasn't anger. Not exactly. It was something deeper.
Colder.
A kind of clarity that doesn't come with noise, just certainty. The kind that says, you've been ignoring this for too long. Because the truth was, this wasn't new. Not really. My parents had never quite known what to do with Eva. Or maybe they just never wanted to. And if I was being honest with myself, they hadn't really known what to do with me either. Not the real me. Just the version of me that agreed. That complied. That paid. I didn't reply to the message right away. I sat with Eva until her breathing slowed, until the tears stopped, until she leaned against me like she always did when she needed comfort but didn't want to ask for it. Then I went to my room, closed the door, and stared at my phone. My fingers hovered over the screen for a long time before I finally typed, "Understood. I'll cancel my card for the event." I hit send. And that was it. Because the truth was, that entire Thanksgiving dinner, the catering, the turkey, the wine, the decorative details my mother loved to take credit for, all of it was paid for by me. For the past 3 years, I never mentioned it, never asked for recognition. I made good money as a consultant. It didn't feel like a burden. Until that moment. Until I realized I had been funding a table my daughter wasn't even welcome to sit at. So I canceled everything. Every order. Every delivery. Every service. No warning. No explanation. Just gone. Thanksgiving morning, Eva and I stayed home. We made pancakes in our pajamas. She insisted on adding too many chocolate chips, and I let her. We ate at the kitchen counter instead of a formal table. No pressure. No pretending. Around 11, my phone started lighting up. The family group chat. Pictures started coming in. The dining room. Perfectly set. Plates aligned. Glasses polished. My mother captioned one, "Just waiting on the feast." I stared at it for a second, then muted the chat. But the messages kept coming. Ben, my older brother, grinning beside our dad, both of them holding beers like nothing in the world could possibly go wrong. My sister-in-law posting a boomerang of her and my mom clinking glasses. And then, the one that made me pause.
A group photo.
Everyone smiling. Captioned, "To family that behaves." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because at that point, they still didn't know. They were laughing inside a moment that hadn't caught up with them yet. At 2:45, my phone buzzed again. A direct message from Ben. "Hey, was the food supposed to come later this year, or—" A few minutes later, "Mom says nothing showed up. She's freaking out." I set my phone down. Didn't answer. Didn't explain. Because for once, I wasn't the one responsible for fixing it. That night, Eva and I sat on the couch under a blanket, eating simple turkey sandwiches from the deli down the street. We watched The Princess Bride. She laughed in all the right places. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't associated with Thanksgiving in a long time. Peace. Real peace. But even then, I knew. That wasn't the end of it. It was just the beginning. Because while they were scrambling to figure out where their dinner had gone, there was something else already unraveling behind the scenes. Something they hadn't told me. Something I had already seen coming. And soon, they were going to need me again. The first sign came the Monday after Thanksgiving. I was in the middle of a client meeting when Ben called twice in a row. I didn't pick up. Then came the text. "Hey, are you free to talk? It's important. Nothing to do with Thanksgiving." That last part almost made me laugh. Nothing to do with Thanksgiving. As if they could separate the cruelty from the consequence just because it was inconvenient. An hour later, my mother called. Then my father. Then Ben again. It was like they had suddenly remembered I existed. Not as a daughter, not as Eva's mother, but as the emergency exit they always expected to be unlocked. That night, I finally checked my voicemail. My mother's voice sounded different. Not sharp. Not offended. Tired. "Genevieve, sweetheart, we need to talk. There's a situation with the bank. Just a temporary issue with the mortgage. Nothing dramatic, but we may need some help."
Temporary.
That was the word she used. Like a house slipping toward foreclosure was just a misplaced receipt. But I already knew more than she thought. 3 months earlier, a letter had arrived at my house addressed to my parents. I almost sent it back unopened. But the envelope was from a credit union I didn't recognize, and something about it felt wrong. When I opened it, I saw the truth. A loan. One my parents had co-signed with Ben for a brand new BMW. And the collateral listed was their home. The house they had lived in for 27 years. The house I grew up in. The house where I once thought love was supposed to live. They were behind on payments. When I called my mother about it back then, she brushed me off. "It's handled," she said. "Don't worry yourself over things you don't understand." So I let it go. I shouldn't have. By the time they started calling after Thanksgiving, the loan had gone into default. The credit union was preparing to move forward unless the debt was settled within 30 days. I didn't answer them right away. For 3 days, I let the calls come. My father left a message about family sticking together. Ben texted that it was not as bad as it sounded. My mother sent one heart emoji, then another message asking if Eva had calmed down. Not, "Is Eva okay?" Not, "We're sorry." Just, had she calmed down? Like my daughter's heartbreak was an inconvenience that needed to pass quickly so they could return to asking for money. My father finally wrote a long message saying they knew I wouldn't let something this small ruin everything. Small. That was what he called it. Losing the home they had risked for Ben's second luxury car in 2 years. Small. But Eva, crying on my laundry room floor because her grandmother had excluded her from Thanksgiving? Apparently that was small, too. I sat with that message longer than I should have. Because there was still a part of me, the tired, trained, obedient part, that wanted to fix it. Not because they deserved it. Because I knew what losing that house would mean. And maybe because some small, foolish piece of me still hoped that if I helped them one more time, they might finally see me. See Eva. See what we were worth beyond what I could provide. So I helped. That's the part I still think about sometimes. I wired the money directly to the credit union. Not to my parents. Not to Ben. Directly to the place that held the debt. Then I sent proof of payment and said nothing else. I let them sweat for a few more days before the official letter arrived confirming the foreclosure process had been withdrawn. After that, the tone changed immediately. My mother called with warmth in her voice I hadn't heard in months. Maybe years. Genevieve, honey, we're so grateful, she said. Your father and I were talking. We'd love to take Eva Christmas shopping. Make it up to her. I closed my eyes, because that was exactly the kind of sentence I had once prayed to hear. Not because of the shopping, because of the effort, the possibility, the idea that maybe fear had humbled them enough to become human again. I wanted to believe it. I really did. Eva wanted to believe it too. When I told her Grandma wanted to take her shopping, her whole face changed. She tried not to look too excited, but she couldn't help it. She picked out her sparkly boots, even though I knew they rubbed the backs of her heels. She packed a little purse with her allowance money and a folded list of gift ideas written in purple marker. At the bottom of the list, she had drawn a tiny heart next to Grandma. That almost made me cancel. Not because I didn't want her to go, because I suddenly understood how dangerous hope could be in the wrong hands. My mother arrived smiling, too brightly. My father waited in the car. Eva hugged me before leaving and whispered, "I'll bring you something if I find something pretty." I watched her climb into the back seat, watched my mother close the door, watched the car pull away. And for 4 hours, I couldn't settle. I cleaned the same counter twice, checked my phone too often, told myself I was being paranoid, told myself people could change. But when they brought Eva home, I knew before she said a word. She stepped inside, with her shoulders small and her eyes lowered. No excited stories. No shopping bag swinging from her hand. Just one paper bag clutched loosely between her fingers. My mother barely looked at me. "The mall was crowded," she said quickly. "Didn't find much." Then she left, like she couldn't get away fast enough. I closed the door and turned to Eva. She didn't speak. She walked straight to her room and shut the door. Inside the little paper bag was a rubber snowman keychain. That was all. I knocked softly and sat beside her on the bed. "How was it?" I asked. She shrugged. "Fine." But later that night, I heard her crying into her pillow. Quietly. Like she was ashamed of making sound. I sat beside her until she finally told me. They hadn't taken her shopping for herself. They had taken her to buy gifts for her cousins. For Ben's children. For the new baby. Eva watched my mother choose outfits, toys, and even a tiny gold bracelet for the baby to grow into. When Eva asked if she could look at something, my mother told her, "Not today, we already spent too much." Then she said the words Eva didn't fully understand. "We have to take care of the real grandkids." At the food court, my father said, "At least she didn't act out in public this time." Eva didn't cry in front of them. She didn't ask questions. She just waited to come home. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was angry, because I finally understood. There was no turning point coming. No apology that would undo this. No amount of money I paid, no amount of grace I offered, no silence I swallowed would ever make them love my daughter the way she deserved. They hadn't changed. They had only needed something. And once they got it, they went right back to showing me the truth. I didn't confront them right away. That might sound strange, but by then, I understood something I hadn't before. Reacting in the moment would only give them space to deflect, to twist, to minimize what they had done. I didn't want another conversation where Eva's pain became a misunderstanding. So I stayed quiet. I let them think everything was fine. Because at that point, it wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about seeing clearly. And once you see something clearly, you can't unsee it. A week passed. Then another. They didn't call. Didn't check on Eva. Didn't ask how the shopping trip had gone from her perspective.
Silence.
Not the peaceful kind. The kind that confirms exactly how little you mattered to begin with. 2 weeks before Christmas, my father showed up at my door. No call. No warning. Just a knock, firm, familiar, the same rhythm he used when I was younger. The kind that used to mean I had no choice but to answer. This time, I chose to. I opened the door slowly. He smiled, like nothing had happened. Like Thanksgiving had been a minor misunderstanding. Like Eva hadn't come home and cried herself to sleep. "How's everything?" he asked casually. "How's the little one doing?" The little one. He couldn't even say her name. That told me everything I needed to know before he even stepped inside. I didn't invite him in. I stood in the doorway and waited. He cleared his throat slightly, shifting his weight. Then he got to it. "We've got a bit of a situation again," he said. Of course they did. Apparently, the BMW they had helped Ben buy had accumulated fines.
Toll violations.
Unpaid tickets. Insurance issues. All registered under my father's name. Now the DMV was threatening to suspend his license unless everything was cleared immediately. "It's not Ben's fault," he added quickly. "The notices went to the wrong address. The system's a mess." I just looked at him. Really looked. At the lines in his face. At the expectation behind his eyes. At the way he had already decided how this conversation would end. "It's just a few thousand," he continued. "You've helped before. We're all very grateful."
Grateful.
The word hung in the air, like something rehearsed. Then he laughed lightly, as if trying to soften it. "Think of it as an early inheritance." That was it. That was the exact moment something inside me shifted completely. Not cracked. Not broke. Just settled. Like a door quietly closing. "No," I said. Just that. No explanation. No hesitation. No softening. He blinked. Confused. Like the word didn't belong in my mouth. "Genevieve," he said slowly. "We're family. You don't turn your back on family." I tilted my head slightly. "Does Eva count as family?" The silence that followed was immediate. Heavy. He didn't answer right away. His eyes shifted. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked down, then back at me, like he was trying to find a way around the question instead of through it. That silence said more than anything he could have. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me so Eva wouldn't hear. "This is the last time we're having this conversation," I said calmly. He frowned slightly. "You're overreacting," he replied. "Your mother didn't mean—" "Don't," I cut in. Not loudly, but firmly enough that he stopped. "For 10 years, I continued, you and Mom have made sure my daughter knows she doesn't belong. Not with words, not directly, but with everything else." "That's not true," he said quickly. "It is," I said, "and you know it." He shook his head. "You're twisting things. You're too sensitive." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. Because I realized something important in that moment. I didn't need him to understand. I just needed him to hear me. "You need to leave," I said. He stood there for a few seconds, waiting. Like he thought I might change my mind. Like I always had before. But I didn't move. Eventually, he turned and walked away. No goodbye. No apology. Just gone. The next day, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. One line. "We always knew you'd punish us for not loving your mistake." I stared at the screen for a long time. My chest felt hollow. Not sharp pain. Not even anger. Just something empty. Because there it was. Everything they had implied for years. Everything they had hidden behind polite smiles and quiet exclusions. Now written out.
Clear. Undeniable.
My daughter. Their granddaughter. A mistake. That was the moment I stopped hoping. I blocked their numbers. All of them. My mother. My father. Ben. His wife. Every contact. Every social account. No announcements. No explanations. Just silence. The kind you choose. The kind that protects. The first few days felt strange, like something was missing, even though what was missing had never really been good. I kept expecting a message to slip through. A call from a different number. A relative stepping in to fix things. But nothing came. 2 weeks passed. Then, just after New Year's, the silence broke. Not from them. From my aunt, my mother's sister. She called from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was careful.
Gentle.
She said she didn't want to get involved, but my parents weren't doing well. That I should try to have compassion. She didn't know. She didn't know about the message. About that word.
Mistake.
I didn't call her back. Then came an email from Ben. Subject line, "We need help." 3 words. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just need. I didn't open it. But a few days later, something else arrived. A letter. Handwritten. From my mother. 5 pages. I read it slowly. Not because I wanted to. Because I needed to know how far she was willing to go. Most of it was explanations. Not quite apologies. Justifications wrapped in softer language. She said they struggled to connect with Eva because she didn't feel like the rest of the family. She said they weren't ready to be grandparents when Eva was born. That they had made mistakes along the way. Mistakes. That word again. Carefully chosen. Small enough to minimize. Soft enough to avoid accountability. Then, near the end, she finally said what the letter was really about. The house. It was still in trouble. The payment I had made hadn't fixed everything. There was a second mortgage. One I had never known about. And now the bank had started proceedings again. This time, there was no delay. The house was scheduled for auction in 45 days. And she wanted me to save it. Again. I folded the letter carefully. Not to keep it. Just so Eva wouldn't see it in the trash. Because some things she didn't need to carry. That night, I sat beside her on the couch. "We're not going to see Grandma and Grandpa anymore," I said gently. She looked at me. Not confused. Not surprised. Just quiet. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. I shook my head. "No," I said. "You didn't do anything wrong." "Then why?" she asked softly. I took a breath. Because sometimes people don't know how to love the way they should, even when they're supposed to. She thought about that, then nodded. "Can we have spaghetti tonight?" she asked. I smiled a little. "Yeah," I said. "We can." And that was it. No tears. No questions. Just acceptance. The kind children learn too early when the world doesn't treat them fairly. And that night, something inside me finally settled into place. Not anger. Not grief. Just clarity. 3 weeks before the house was scheduled for auction, they came back. Both of them. I hadn't seen my parents since the day my father stood on my porch asking for money, like it was something he was owed. Now they were standing outside my door again.
Unannounced. Uninvited.
Like time had folded in on itself, and we were back in a version of my life where boundaries didn't exist. I didn't open the door right away. I stood there, just behind it, looking through the peephole. My mother was holding a folder. Thick. Organized.
Prepared.
Like she believed paperwork could fix what they had broken. My father stood beside her, quieter this time. Older. Not physically, not exactly. But there was something in the way his shoulders sat, something heavier in the way he looked at the ground instead of the door. They rang the bell again, then knocked. "Genevieve," my mother called through the door, her voice tight but controlled. "We know you're home." That's when I heard footsteps behind me. Eva. "Should I get it?" she asked softly. I turned to her immediately. "No," I said. Just that. No explanation. I placed my hand gently on her shoulder and guided her back down the hallway. "Let's put some music on in your room," I said. Something loud. She didn't argue. She just nodded and walked with me. I turned on her favorite playlist, waited until the sound filled the space enough to cover voices from downstairs. Then I went back. They were still there. Of course they were. I opened the door. Not all the way. Just enough. Before they could speak, before my mother could open that folder, before my father could try to soften things with silence, I said one thing. "You can stop asking. It's over." My mother blinked. "Genevieve, you don't understand the full situation." "I don't need to," I said. She tightened her grip on the folder. "The bank." "I don't care." The words came out calm. Not sharp. Not emotional. Just final. My father didn't say anything. He just stood there, watching the ground, like he had already reached the end of this conversation before it started. "We've taken steps," my mother continued quickly. "We're trying to fix things, but this is complicated. We just need a little more time, and if you could just help bridge the gap." I shook my head. "No." Her expression flickered. Not sadness. Not regret.
Frustration.
Like I was making something simple unnecessarily difficult. "This is your home too," she said, her voice shifting, reaching for something emotional. "Your childhood, your memories. Do you really want to see it gone?" I held her gaze. "That house stopped being mine a long time ago," I said quietly. She hesitated. That wasn't the response she expected. So she tried something else. "What about Eva?" she asked. "Don't you want her to have a place like that? Somewhere to come back to? Somewhere that connects her to family?" I almost smiled. Not because it was funny. Because it was so far removed from reality, it barely felt real. "You already made sure she doesn't have that," I said. My father shifted slightly beside her. Still silent. Still not looking at me. I took a small step forward, enough that the screen door was the only thing separating us. "I tried," I continued. "I helped when I shouldn't have. I gave you time. I gave you chances. I gave you more than you ever gave her." My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "This isn't about that," she said. "It is," I replied. "For you, everything is about money right now. For me, it's about my daughter." There was a pause. A long one. The kind where everyone knows the truth has already been said, and anything after that is just noise. My mother exhaled slowly. Would you at least consider letting Eva write to us? She asked, softer now. So she doesn't forget her grandparents? That was the moment. The final one. I looked at her. Really looked. At the woman who had spent years deciding my daughter was optional, who had measured love in conditions and found Eva lacking. You made sure she'll never forget you, I said. And then I closed the door. Not slammed. Not dramatic. Just closed. The house sold 19 days later. I didn't check the listing. Didn't watch the auction. The only reason I knew the date was because my mother had written it in the corner of her letter, like it was something I was supposed to carry. I didn't. Last I heard, they moved in with Ben. Which made sense. He had always been the center of their world. Maybe now he could carry the weight of it too. Eva didn't ask about them. Not once. Not where they went. Not why they stopped coming. Not if they would ever come back. It was like she understood, in the quiet way children sometimes do, that some doors aren't meant to reopen. I never told her everything. Not about the message. Not about the word. Not about the years of small, invisible cuts that added up to something irreversible. I told her what she needed to know. That love isn't something you owe people just because they share your blood. That family isn't defined by who's related to you. It's defined by who shows up, who stays, who chooses you, over and over again. Sometimes, I still think about them. Not with guilt, not with regret. Just distance. Like remembering a place you used to live in but no longer recognize. There are moments when I wonder how they're doing. If they're still telling the same version of the story. If they ever think about Eva and realize what they lost. But I never reach out. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't just walk away. I closed the door. I locked it. And this time, I didn't keep the key. My name is Zara Kensington. I'm 30 years old, and if you had asked me that morning what I was doing, I would have said something simple. Running errands. Nothing important. Nothing that felt like it was about to split my life clean in half. I was standing in line at a store, holding a basket full of things I didn't need. Candles, a throw blanket, something soft and unnecessary, when my phone buzzed. Just once. I almost didn't check it. But I did. 6 words. From my younger sister, Amber. You're out of the wedding. Only real family. No emojis. No explanation. Just that. I remember staring at the screen like it had glitched. Like maybe if I blinked enough times, the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. At first, I thought it was a joke. Amber had always had that kind of humor. Sharp, dramatic, a little cruel when she wanted attention. But uninviting me from her wedding? That wasn't a joke. That was something else. Something colder. My stomach tightened, but I didn't react right away. I opened the group chat. The one with our cousins, our aunts, our mom, and a few of Amber's friends. And that's when I saw it. The messages. A laughing emoji from one of the bridesmaids. Another message from Amber, casual, like she was talking about the weather. Let's keep the drama out of my day. Zara's just not really part of this anymore. Not really part of this anymore. I read that sentence twice. Then a third time. Someone else chimed in, one of our cousins. Didn't she just pay for your dress fitting? Amber replied almost instantly. Oh yeah, that's canceled too. She can take her charity back. More laughing emojis. Scrolling up, scrolling down. Looking for someone, anyone, to say something. To push back. to ask what she meant. No one did. Not one person. I stood there in that line, surrounded by people checking out groceries and chatting like it was just another normal afternoon, while my entire place in my own family was being erased in real time.
Quietly. Effortlessly.
Like I had never really belonged there to begin with. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just left my basket on the counter and walked out. Didn't even look back. The drive home felt longer than it should have. Or maybe it was just quieter. Too quiet. When I got inside, I didn't sit down right away. I went straight to my desk, opened my laptop, and started pulling up receipts. Every payment. Every transfer. Every "don't worry, I've got it" I had ever said to her. Because that's who I had been. The one who showed up. Always. When Amber couldn't afford her college rent, I covered it. When she maxed out her credit card 2 years ago, I paid it off. When she needed help getting her first apartment, I co-signed everything. I never asked for anything back. Not once. And the wedding? I had paid for half of it. The catering deposit, $4,200. The DJ, $1,500. Florals, $2,300. Photography deposit, another $1,000. She had looked me in the eyes 6 weeks ago and said, "You're the only one I trust with this." And I believed her. That was my mistake. I sat there on my couch, scrolling through everything. Every invoice. Every confirmation email. Every proof that I had been there for her in ways no one else had. And then I opened the group chat again. My fingers hovered over the screen for a second. Not shaking. Not angry. Just steady. Then I typed, "Great, then real family can cover their own bills." No insults. No yelling. Just that. And then I attached everything. One by one.
Catering.
DJ. Florals.
Photography.
Screenshots. Receipts.
Proof.
I sent them all. And then I started canceling. One vendor at a time.
Calmly.
Methodically. Like I was closing tabs on a browser. Done. 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 The chat lit up immediately. At first, more laughing. Amber replied, "Okay, bitter much?" One of her friends posted a meme. Something about Bridezilla versus Brokezilla. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because I knew something they didn't. The laughter wouldn't last. And it didn't. By the next morning, everything had changed. I woke up to 47 unread messages. 47. I didn't open them right away. I made coffee. Opened the window. Let the cold air in. And stood there for a while, just breathing. There's a kind of calm that comes after something breaks inside you. Not peace. Not relief. Just quiet. Like a switch has been flipped, and there's no way to flip it back. When I finally opened the chat, the tone was completely different. "Zara, you're kidding, right? You actually canceled everything? That's low, even for you." And then my mom. "You need to fix this. This is your sister's wedding." She was stressed. She didn't mean it. You don't cancel someone's wedding out of spite. Out of spite. I read that one twice. Because that wasn't what this was. I hadn't insulted her. I hadn't humiliated her. I hadn't even raised my voice. I just stopped paying. Stopped being useful. And suddenly, That made me the villain. Then Amber sent the message that actually landed. You were always jealous I was getting married first. You never wanted this for me. That one sat heavy in my chest. Not because it was true. It wasn't. But because she believed it. Or at least, she needed to believe it. Because the alternative, that she had used me, discarded me, and expected me to stay quiet, was harder to admit. I didn't reply. A few hours later, my phone rang. The florist. She sounded stressed. Said Amber had called, screaming, demanding everything be reinstated, claiming I had no right to cancel. I let her finish. Then I said calmly, the payments were in my name. A pause. Then a quiet, yes, they were. I won't be covering anything else, I said. And I meant it. Then came my father. He never calls. So when his name appeared on my screen, I almost felt something close to hope. Maybe someone finally understood. Maybe someone saw it for what it was. I answered. He didn't ask how I was. Didn't ask what happened. He just said, did you really sabotage Amber's wedding?
Sabotage.
That word again. I told him the truth. That I had been told I wasn't family, while I was paying for everything. There was a pause. Then he said, you're being petty.
Petty.
I didn't argue. Didn't explain. I just ended the call. Because there was nothing left to say. That night, I sent one last message to the group chat. Wait for your wedding gift. No one responded. Not a single person. But I wasn't sitting there hurt. Or crying. Or trying to fix it. I was thinking. Because Amber had forgotten something. Something important. I used to live with her. I knew her habits. Her secrets. The things she begged me not to tell anyone. And more importantly, she forgot about New Year's Eve, the night I walked into her room by accident, looking for a charger, and saw her with someone who definitely wasn't her fiancé. His name was Kyle, and I had a video. I hadn't meant to take it. My phone had been in my hand. I hit record without realizing. 22 seconds. That's all it was. Her voice. Her laugh. Her words.
Clear. Undeniable.
I had tucked it away back then. Told myself it wasn't my place. That it wasn't my business. But now it was. I didn't say anything else that week. I let them sit with it. Let them scramble. Let them rebuild whatever version of the wedding they could afford without me. Amber started posting vague things online. About toxic energy. About protecting your peace. Some of the family reshared them. Of course they did. But the wedding was still happening. Different vendors. Cheaper ones, probably. But it was still happening. And I was going to be there. Not because I was invited. I wasn't. But because sometimes the truth doesn't need an invitation. The ceremony was set for Saturday afternoon. A vineyard 2 hours outside the city. Family run.
Casual.
No security. Amber probably thought I wouldn't show up. After everything. That I'd stay home.
Disappear quietly.
That was her mistake. Because by the time Saturday came, I wasn't the same person she had uninvited. And I wasn't coming there to fix anything. I was coming to finish it. Saturday arrived with the sky too bright for what I was about to do. That was the strange part. The world looked normal. Sunlight on the sidewalks. people walking dogs, neighbors dragging trash bins back from the curb. Nothing in the air warned anyone that a wedding was about to turn into a funeral for every lie my family had protected. I stood in front of my mirror for almost 20 minutes, not because I cared how I looked, because I needed to recognize myself. I chose a navy blue dress. Simple, quiet, not flashy enough to look like revenge, not plain enough to look like shame. I curled my hair, put on small earrings, and stared at my reflection until the woman staring back looked calm. That was important. I didn't want them to see the damage. I wanted them to see the result. Before leaving, I opened the video one last time. 22 seconds. That was all it took to ruin a life. Or maybe not ruin it. Maybe reveal it. Amber was in her bedroom, half hidden by the doorframe, her hands tangled in Kyle's hair. He was laughing. She was laughing too. Soft.
Careless.
Like Mason didn't exist. Then her voice came through, low but clear. He's just a safety net. I don't love him like I love you. I closed the video before it finished. My stomach twisted. Not for Amber. For Mason. Because he had been boring in the safest way. Kind.
Polite.
The type of man who helped clear plates at family dinners without being asked. The type who remembered my mother liked lemon in her tea. The type Amber used to roll her eyes at when he wasn't looking. I should have told him months ago. That truth followed me all the way to the vineyard. The drive took 2 hours. Fields stretched on both sides of the road, gold and brown under the afternoon sun. Every mile made the decision feel less like anger and more like gravity. Something inevitable. Something already falling. When I arrived, cars were lined along the gravel drive. White ribbons tied to wooden posts fluttered in the wind. A sign near the entrance read, "Amber and Mason forever." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because some words age badly before the ink is even dry. No one stopped me. No one checked a list. Guests were too busy smiling, taking pictures, fixing jackets, adjusting heels. I walked in like I belonged there. Because once, I had. A few relatives noticed me. Their eyes widened, then slid away. That was the family specialty. Seeing something uncomfortable and pretending it wasn't there. I didn't approach anyone. I didn't hug my mother. Didn't look for my father. Didn't give Amber's bridesmaids the satisfaction of a reaction. Near the guest book, there was a white gift box wrapped in satin ribbon. I pulled a small envelope from my purse. Inside was a card. I had written only 6 words. "Hope you enjoy the memories." I slipped it into the box and walked away. The ceremony space was beautiful, in that artificial wedding way. Rows of white chairs. A floral arch wrapped in faux vines. Barrels with candles on top. Soft music floating through hidden speakers. Everything designed to look effortless. Everything paid for by someone else, until 3 days ago. I took a seat near the back, far enough to disappear, close enough to see everything. Amber stood hidden at first behind a line of bridesmaids. Then the music changed. Everyone rose. And there she was, my sister. White dress. Perfect hair. Perfect smile. A woman walking toward a future she had already betrayed. For 1 second, I remembered her as a little girl. Amber at 7, missing her front tooth, crying because she couldn't tie her shoes. Amber at 12, asleep against my shoulder during a storm. Amber at 16, calling me from a party because she was scared and didn't want Mom to know. I had always gone to her. Always. That was the part nobody saw. They saw the money, the canceled vendors, the public fallout. They didn't see the years of small rescues, the late-night drives, the covered lies, the way I had built myself around being useful to people who only loved me when I was convenient. Amber reached the altar. Mason looked at her like she was the answer to every question he'd been afraid to ask. That hurt more than I expected, because he didn't deserve this. Whatever anyone thought of me, he didn't deserve to marry a woman who called him a safety net. The officiant began. Something about love.
Commitment. Honesty.
The word honesty felt almost violent. Amber's smile never wavered. My mother dabbed at her eyes in the front row. My father sat stiffly beside her, proud and stone-faced. Around them, aunts and cousins leaned into the moment, all of them dressed in their best clothes, all of them pretending this family had not spent the last week tearing me apart. I kept my phone in my lap. Screen dimmed. Video ready. My thumb resting over the send button. I told myself there was still time to stop. There was. I could stand up, walk out, drive home. I could let Mason make his vows. Let Amber have her day. Let the lie become legal. And then what? Another year of secrets? Another decade of Amber crying victim while someone else cleaned up the mess? Another family dinner where everyone knew something was wrong, but called silence peace? No. I was done mistaking silence for goodness. The officiant turned to Mason. He began his vows. His voice shook at first, then steadied. He talked about meeting Amber, about her laugh, about how she made life feel bigger. Amber looked at him with wet eyes.
Beautiful performance.
Almost believable. Then it was her turn. She unfolded a piece of paper. Her hands trembled. For a second, I wondered if guilt had finally found her. Then she looked at Mason and smiled. Mason, she began, you are my safest place. My thumb pressed send. The video went out to the family group chat. Every cousin, every aunt, my mother, my father, and Mason. For the first few seconds, nothing happened. The wind moved through the vines. A child coughed somewhere behind me. Amber kept speaking. You have loved me with patience. Then one phone buzzed. Then another. Then 5 more. A ripple moved through the chairs. Heads tilted down. Brows furrowed. Screens lit up like tiny witnesses. Amber noticed. Her voice faltered. Mason's pocket vibrated. He ignored it at first. Then it vibrated again. And again. He looked confused, almost apologetic, as he pulled out his phone. I watched his face change. Not dramatically. That would have been easier. It was slower. A soft confusion. Then stillness. Then the kind of blankness people get when their mind refuses to accept what their eyes already know. Amber stopped speaking. Mason? She whispered. He didn't answer. My mother had her phone in her hand now. So did Aunt Linda. So did Cousin Lindsay. The murmuring spread. Mason lifted the phone slightly, turned the screen toward Amber. She went pale. Not guilty pale. Caught pale. There's a difference. She reached for the phone. He pulled it back. Don't, he said. One word. Quiet.
Final.
The officiant looked lost. Amber's bridesmaids froze in a pastel line behind her. I stood. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Just stood. Every eye turned toward the back. For the first time all week, no one laughed. I walked down the aisle. My heels pressed softly into the runner. Step by step, past cousins who had mocked me, past aunts who had stayed silent, past my mother, whose face was twisted between horror and rage. I stopped a few feet from the altar. Amber stared at me like I was a ghost she had buried too shallow. I looked at Mason first, then at my sister, then at the family who had decided my usefulness was love and my boundary was cruelty. And I said, calmly, "You all need to know who my sister really is." No one moved. No one breathed. For one perfect, terrible second, the whole vineyard was silent. Then Amber screamed. Amber's scream didn't sound human at first. It was sharp, panicked, like something cornered. She lunged toward me so suddenly that one of the bridesmaids stumbled sideways, trying to get out of the way. The officiant dropped his notes. Someone in the front row gasped, loud enough to echo. I didn't move. Not because I was brave, because I was done running. Before she could reach me, Mason stepped in front of her. Not aggressively, not dramatically, just firmly. He caught her wrist midair. It wasn't violent. It was controlled. That somehow made it worse. Amber froze for a second, stunned that he had stopped her. Then she turned on him. "Mason, don't," she started, her voice breaking into something desperate, something unrecognizable. He didn't raise his voice, didn't look angry. He just looked finished. He held her wrist like she was a stranger who had grabbed him in the street. And then he asked 2 words. "Is it true?" No shouting. No accusations. Just that. Amber's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. Her eyes darted. Toward my parents, toward the guests, toward me, searching for something to hold on to. There was nothing. Because for once, there was no version of this she could twist into something softer. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry. Not no. Not, it's not what it looks like. Just, sorry. The worst possible answer. Mason let go of her wrist, slowly, like he didn't want to touch her anymore. She reached for him again, this time softer, almost pleading. "It didn't mean anything," she said quickly. "It was just once. I was confused. I was stressed. He didn't react. Didn't even blink. He looked down at his phone again. Watched the video a second time. Right there. In front of everyone. Amber's voice from the screen, laughing, careless, intimate, cut through the air like something alive. "He's just a safety net." She let out a small, broken sound. "Mason, please." He stepped back. Just 1 step. But it might as well have been a mile. Because that was the moment something irreversible happened. He stopped seeing her as the woman he loved, and started seeing her as the person in the video. He lifted his gaze. Not to Amber. To me. For a second, I thought he was going to say something. Ask something. Blame me. But he didn't. There was something like understanding in his eyes. Something quiet. Something heavy. Then he turned. Walked past the altar, past the chairs, past the guests who were still frozen between watching and pretending not to. He didn't run. Didn't rush. He just left. You could hear the gravel crunch under his shoes as he reached the parking area. Then the sound of a car door. An engine. And then, nothing. Amber collapsed. Not gracefully. Not the kind of crying people show in movies. She dropped to her knees in the grass, her dress pooling around her like something too heavy to carry. She sobbed.
Loud. Ugly. Uncontrolled.
Our mother rushed forward immediately, dropping to her side, pulling her into her arms. "What happened? What did you do?" she whispered, even though she already knew. Some of the bridesmaids hovered, unsure whether to comfort or disappear. Guests started standing. Some moved closer. Some moved away. Conversations broke out in low, frantic voices. Confusion turning into judgment. Judgment turning into distance. I stood there for a moment longer. No one came to me. No one spoke to me. I wasn't part of the scene anymore. I was the cause of it. And in their eyes, that was worse. I turned, walked back down the aisle, the same path I had just come from. But everything felt different now. Heavier.
Quieter.
Behind me, Amber's crying filled the air. Someone was arguing with someone else. My father's voice rose, sharp and angry. Not at Amber. At me. Of course. I didn't stop. Didn't look back. By the time I reached my car, my hands were steady. My breathing even. It should have felt like victory. It didn't. It felt like something had ended. Not just the wedding. Something older. Something deeper. I got in the car and drove. Didn't turn on the radio. Didn't check my phone. Just drove. 2 hours back through the same fields. The same quiet roads. But everything inside me felt hollow. Not broken. Just emptied out. When I got home, I left my phone on the counter, face down. I didn't need to see it. Didn't need to watch the fallout unfold in real time, because I already knew how it would go. The truth wouldn't matter. Not really. What would matter was that I had exposed it.
Publicly.
In a way they couldn't control. In a way that made them look bad. That was the real crime. I took a shower. Let the water run until it went cold. Sat on the edge of my bed afterward, staring at nothing. At some point, I fell asleep. When I woke up, it was dark. The room felt unfamiliar for a second, like I had woken up somewhere else entirely. Then I remembered. The wedding. The video.
Amber.
I reached for my phone. Turned it on. 36 missed calls. Most from my mother. A few from unknown numbers. Relatives, probably. People who hadn't spoken to me in months, suddenly finding my number because now there was something to say. There was one voicemail. From Amber. I didn't listen to it. I deleted it. The group chat was chaos. Messages stacked on top of each other.
Paragraphs.
Arguments. People picking sides. Some still had the video open, commenting under it like it was a post instead of a life falling apart. Uncle Ray, this is a disgrace. Cousin Lindsay, I knew something was off about her. Aunt Maria, this should have been handled privately. Someone else. Everyone calm down. And then, my father. We will not tolerate this kind of public humiliation in this family. Not her cheating. Not her lying. Not what she said about Mason. The humiliation. That was the problem. That was always the problem. I scrolled for a while. Didn't reply. Didn't defend myself. Because there was nothing left to defend. By morning, the chat had gone quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavier than noise. Then the private messages started, one by one. You've made your point. Enough is enough. From Amber. I hope you're happy. You've destroyed my life. From a cousin I barely spoke to. You don't even know the whole story. And then one that made me pause. From cousin Jess. You okay? No accusation. No judgment. Just that. I stared at it for a long time. Didn't answer. Not because I didn't appreciate it. Because I didn't know how to answer honestly. I didn't feel okay. But I didn't feel not okay either. I felt nothing. A few hours later, my dad called again. I let it go to voicemail. He left one sentence. Your mother is inconsolable. Call her. I didn't. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to fix this. The silence after everything was louder than the chaos. That was the part no one prepares you for. Not the screaming. Not the confrontation. But what comes after, when everyone decides you're the problem they don't want to explain? The next morning, I woke up expecting something. Another wave of messages. More calls. Some kind of explosion. Instead, there was nothing. No missed calls. No texts. No new messages in the group chat I had already muted. It was like someone had pulled a plug. Like I had been erased from the conversation entirely. At first, it felt like relief. Then, it started to feel like something else. A quiet kind of exile. By the afternoon, I left my apartment. Not because I had somewhere to go. Just because the walls felt too still. I found myself driving without thinking, until I ended up in front of a small auto garage on the east side of town. Mason used to work there. I sat in the car for a minute, debating. Then I got out. Inside, the smell of oil and metal hit me immediately. One of the mechanics looked up. Can I help you? He asked. I hesitated. Is Mason here? He shook his head. He took the week off. Of course he did. I nodded, already turning to leave, then paused. If he comes back, can you give him this? I scribbled my number on a receipt and handed it over. The mechanic looked at me, curious, but not intrusive. Sure. I didn't explain who I was. Didn't need to. Some things didn't need more attention. I went home after that, closed the blinds, and slept. Not for a few hours. For 13. When I woke up, it was evening again. And for the first time since the wedding, I felt something. Not anger. Not regret. Just distance. Like everything that had happened belonged to someone else. By the end of the week, Amber had disappeared online. Her Instagram? Empty. No photos. No stories. No wedding previews she had posted weeks before. Gone. Even the hashtag she had created for the wedding had turned into something else entirely. People were using it to post jokes. Memes. Edited versions of the video with dramatic music layered over it.
Public humiliation.
The kind my family had accused me of causing. Now it was everywhere. And suddenly, I wasn't the villain anymore. Not publicly. But families don't run on public opinion. They run on loyalty. And within days, they closed ranks. My mom texted, "We raised you better than this. She's your sister. You were supposed to protect her, not destroy her." I read the message 3 times. Then once more, because the word protect felt almost surreal. Protect her from what? Consequences? Truth? Herself? And then came the message that settled everything. We're not sure we want you at Thanksgiving this year. Things are too raw. I stared at that one the longest, because that was the real answer. Not about the wedding. Not about Amber. About where I stood. After everything I had done for them. Everything I had been for them. I was the one being pushed out. Not her. Me. I didn't argue. Didn't ask why. I just typed back one sentence. Don't worry, I won't be there. Then I left the family group chat. Blocked Amber's number. Deleted the voicemails I hadn't listened to. And sat there on my couch.
Alone.
Not crying. Not shaking. Just quiet. It hit me slowly. Not like a wave. More like something settling into place. I didn't have a sister anymore. Not in any way that mattered. The week after that passed in a strange kind of stillness. No calls. No messages. No passive-aggressive comments on my social media. Which was unusual. My family was never quiet when they were upset. But this wasn't about anger. It was about avoidance. I had become the thing they didn't want to explain. The story that didn't fit the version of themselves they liked to present. Amber didn't reach out again. No apology. No explanation. Nothing. It was like she had vanished. And maybe she had. About a week later, my phone rang.
Unknown number.
I almost didn't answer. But I was expecting a work call, so I picked up. Hello? A pause. Then, his voice. Zara? Everything in me went still. Mason. I hope it's okay I called, he said. I leaned against the counter. I didn't give you my number so you could apologize, I said quietly. He let out a small breath. I'm not calling to apologize. That caught me off guard. Then why are you calling? Another pause. Then, to say thank you. I didn't respond right away. He continued. I watched the video. More times than I want to admit, he said. Not because I didn't believe it. I did. I just couldn't understand how I missed it. I closed my eyes. His voice was steady. Not angry. Not broken. Just processing. The distance, he said. The way she'd pull away before arguments, then overcompensate after. I thought it meant she was trying. I thought it meant she cared. I didn't say anything, because there was nothing I could say that would fix that kind of realization. I left, he added. I figured. I canceled the lease, took time off work. I'm staying with a friend in Colorado for a while. Colorado. Far enough. Have you told your parents? I asked. No. A small pause. I don't even know what I would say. I understood that. More than I wanted to. Then he asked something that no one else had. Are you okay? Simple question. But it landed differently. Because he meant it. Not as a setup. Not as a judgment. Just genuinely. I leaned back against the counter. I don't know, I said honestly. I'm not angry anymore. Not sad either. Just empty. There was a quiet understanding on the other end. Then he said something that stayed with me. Sometimes you lose people who were never really yours. I let that sit, because it felt true in a way nothing else had. We didn't talk much after that. He thanked me again. I told him I hoped he found peace. And then we hung up. That was the last time I spoke to him. Thanksgiving came and went. I didn't hear from anyone. I ordered Thai food. Ate it on my couch. Watched a documentary about shipwrecks. It felt fitting. Everything sinking slowly.
Quietly.
No dramatic explosion. Just collapse. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing something uncomfortable. How much of my identity had been tied to fixing things. For Amber. For my parents. For everyone. Without that, I didn't know who I was. One afternoon, I opened a storage box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were old photos. Amber and me as kids. Matching pajamas. Birthday cakes. A beach trip where we argued over who got the last juice box. I sat on the floor for a long time, just looking at them, trying to figure out if any of it had been real, or if I had just imagined a closeness that had always been one-sided. I didn't throw them away. I couldn't. Some things don't stop mattering just because they hurt. But I put the box back, closed it, and understood something I hadn't before. This wasn't just the end of a fight. It was the end of a relationship, one I had been carrying alone for years. And she had never once said thank you. December came quickly. Cold mornings, frost on the windows, holiday lights everywhere, like the world hadn't changed at all. I didn't hear from anyone, not even a forwarded holiday message. It was like I had been quietly edited out of the family. No announcement, no confrontation, just gone. On Christmas morning, the only message I got was from an old coworker. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to a small diner, sat by the window, ordered pancakes. Across the room, a young couple fed bites of food to their toddler. I watched them for a while, not with jealousy, not even sadness, just observation, like I was seeing something from the outside. Then, sometime around New Year's, I got an email from Amber. Subject line, for what it's worth. No greeting. No softness. Just words. A lot of them. She said she never meant for things to go this far. That I had always made her feel like she owed me something. That I never understood what it was like to grow up in my shadow. That I blew up her life out of spite. She said Mason wasn't perfect. That Kyle was a mistake. That I ruined her future. She didn't say sorry. Not once. Instead, she wrote one line that stayed with me. You made me feel like I was a nobody. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Because it sounded familiar. Too familiar. It was almost exactly what she had made me feel like, the moment she told me I wasn't real family. I didn't reply. I archived the email. Then I blocked her. That was the last time she ever tried to reach me. In January, I started therapy, not because I felt broken, but because I didn't want to become numb. I needed to understand the years I had spent being useful, being needed, being the person everyone turned to when things fell apart, and why I had confused that with being loved. One night, my therapist asked me a question. What part of you are you still waiting for them to acknowledge? I didn't answer right away. But later, I realized, I had been waiting for them to see me as enough. Without the money, without the fixing, without the constant giving. Just enough. I don't know where Amber is now. I heard from a cousin months later that she moved in with Kyle, that they broke up after 2 months, that she's living with a friend now, working a job she doesn't talk about. I don't wish her anything. Not pain. Not happiness. Nothing. Because she's no longer part of my life. And that's not revenge. That's peace. My name is Charlotte Kensington. I'm 35 years old, and before that dinner happened, I used to believe silence could keep a family together. I do not believe that anymore. The night started with candles, expensive plates, and Linda Mercer pretending to smile at me from across the table, like she had not spent the last 6 years quietly reminding me I was never good enough for her son. Daniel sat beside me, scrolling through his phone under the table, whenever conversations became uncomfortable, which lately was almost every conversation involving his parents. Across from us sat Ava, my daughter, 10 years old. Quiet, gentle, the kind of child who apologized when other people stepped on her shoes. She had brought her birthday tablet to dinner because Linda specifically asked what she got for her birthday 3 days earlier. I should have known the question was a trap. The tablet was still inside the pale lavender case Evelyn had bought for her. Ava had already downloaded art programs onto it and spent hours sketching tiny digital portraits of birds and lakes and people holding umbrellas in the rain. That tablet mattered to her. Not because it was expensive, because someone had finally given her something that felt like hers. Linda reached across the table and lightly tapped the box with one manicured nail. "This is very expensive," she said casually. Mark glanced over from his wine glass. "Latest model, too." Ava looked nervous already. She always became smaller around Daniel's parents, like she could somehow disappear if she stayed quiet enough. Then Linda smiled. The kind of smile that always came right before she said something cruel. "She doesn't really need something this advanced," she said. "You should give it to Tyler." The room froze. I honestly thought I had misheard her at first. Ava's fingers stopped moving beside her plate. Daniel adjusted his napkin without looking at anyone. Linda continued, like this was the most reasonable suggestion in the world. "Tyler's preparing for college applications next year. He could actually use this for school." Tyler, the Mercer family's golden child. 16 years old, varsity soccer captain, straight-A student, future lawyer, according to Linda. Every holiday somehow turned into a celebration of whatever Tyler had recently accomplished. Meanwhile, Ava liked drawing foxes and reading fantasy novels under blankets with flashlights. Linda always acted like that made her less important. "She uses it for school, too," I said carefully. "And for her art classes." Mark leaned back in his chair. "Tyler's future depends on opportunities like this. An edge." That was the word he used next. "He needs every edge he can get." Ava finally looked up. Her eyes moved between their faces before landing on mine. "Am I not serious?" The question sliced through me so hard I felt it physically. Daniel cleared his throat. But no words came out. Not one. And suddenly, every small humiliation from the last 6 years came rushing back at once. Every comparison. Every comment about Ava being too sensitive. Every holiday where Tyler opened expensive gifts while Ava received books about manners or puzzles meant for younger kids. Linda reached for the tablet box and slowly slid it closer to herself. "We can send it home with Tyler tonight," she said. "He's stopping by later anyway." That was the moment my mother stood up. Evelyn Kensington was not loud when she was angry. That made her terrifying. She calmly placed one hand over the box and pulled it back toward Ava. "Put that back." The entire table went silent. Linda blinked slowly. "Excuse me?" "I bought that tablet for my granddaughter," Evelyn said. "With my money." Mark laughed awkwardly. "No one's attacking you." Evelyn ignored him completely. Instead, she looked directly at Daniel. And before I could stop her, she said the sentence that changed everything. "Maybe if your boyfriend bought things for his own daughter once in a while, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Daniel's face lost color instantly. Linda shot up from her chair so fast it scraped violently across the floor. Ava flinched. Then, quietly, almost protectively, she pulled the tablet against her chest, like she thought someone might physically take it from her. "What did you just say?" Linda snapped. "You heard me," Evelyn replied. Daniel finally spoke. "Can we not do this right now?" That was his response. Not defending Ava. Not correcting his parents. Just asking everyone to stay calm. I felt something inside me begin cracking open. Evelyn stayed standing. "Charlotte and Ava never asked any of you for anything," she said. "Ava earned that gift. Straight A report card, perfect attendance, first place in her school art competition." Linda crossed her arms. "Tyler has straight A's too, and he's applying to universities. His future actually matters." I stared at her. "So Ava's doesn't?" Mark stood now too. "No one said that." "It's exactly what you implied," Evelyn answered coldly. The room felt hot suddenly, like there wasn't enough air. Daniel looked at me with panic in his eyes, like he wanted me to fix everything for him. Like I was still responsible for keeping peace between his family and mine. "I'm not giving Ava's tablet to anyone," I said. "That's final." Linda turned sharply toward Daniel. "Say something." He rubbed both hands over his face. "It's just a tablet," he muttered. "Maybe Tyler could borrow it sometimes." "Borrow it." Ava's fingers tightened around the case, and something inside me finally shattered completely. "No," I said quietly. "He can't borrow it. He can't touch it. It belongs to Ava." Linda gave a short laugh. "You're being dramatic. This is about fairness." "Fairness?" Evelyn repeated. Then she dropped another truth directly onto the table. "Your son hasn't had stable work in almost 2 years. Charlotte works double shifts at the clinic. I paid their rent last month. And you're talking about fairness?" Daniel's head snapped toward her. "You didn't need to bring that up." Apparently I did. For the first time all evening, Linda's expression changed. Not embarrassed.
Calculating.
"If you can't properly provide for your daughter," she said carefully to Daniel, "maybe you should let us step in more." There it was. The real conversation finally revealing itself. Ava whispered so softly I almost didn't hear her. "I can give it back if it's causing problems." My heart broke instantly. My 10-year-old daughter was willing to surrender her birthday gift just to make adults stop fighting. I stood so quickly, my chair nearly tipped over. "No," I said firmly, "you are not giving anything back." Mark looked irritated now. "You're overreacting." "Guide us into what?" I asked. Linda answered immediately. "Doing what's best for Ava." The words sounded harmless, but underneath them was something ugly, something possessive. "Stable people should make stable decisions," Mark added.
Stable.
I knew exactly what they meant. Poor.
Dependent.
Not polished enough. Not successful enough. Evelyn understood too. "If you think you're more entitled to that child than her mother," she said coldly, "we're going to have a very serious problem." Daniel stepped between everyone finally. "This is getting out of hand." "No," I said quietly. "It's finally honest." Linda looked directly at me. Maybe Ava would be better off spending more time here anyway. The sentence landed like ice water. Ava looked confused, like she genuinely thought she might suddenly be sent somewhere else. "What does that mean?" I asked. Mark answered. "It means she needs structure, stability, direction." By direction, he meant wealth. By stability, he meant obedience. "We are her parents," I said. Linda nodded slowly. Of course, but children thrive in certain environments. Evelyn's eyes narrowed instantly. You're talking about her like she's up for negotiation. Daniel started pacing toward the kitchen and back. Can we all calm down? Nobody listened to him anymore. Linda walked around the table and rested her hand on Ava's shoulder. You'd love staying with us more often, she said softly. We have space, quiet, no stress. Ava gently leaned away from her touch. I like my room. Linda smiled tightly. Children don't always know what's best for them. That sentence made my stomach twist. Evelyn stepped forward immediately. Do not talk about her like she isn't sitting right here. Mark's voice hardened. You're guests in our home. And you're discussing our daughter like she belongs to you, I shot back. Then Linda said the thing that changed the entire atmosphere permanently. If you're struggling financially, she said calmly, there are legal ways to make sure Ava has what she needs. The room went dead silent. Legal ways. Nobody said custody. But suddenly the word was sitting between us anyway. Daniel finally looked alarmed. Mom, stop. Linda never took her eyes off me. We would step in if necessary. Ava's voice trembled. Am I in trouble? That was it. I grabbed my purse immediately. We're leaving. Mark blocked the doorway for half a second too long before stepping aside. You're blowing this out of proportion. Number. They already had. I helped Ava into her coat, while Evelyn gathered her things beside me. Daniel followed us outside without even saying goodbye to his parents. The drive home was silent, except for the sound of Ava clutching the tablet against her chest every time the car turned. 5 minutes passed before Daniel finally spoke. You didn't have to escalate things like that. I turned slowly toward him. Escalate? You made it into a fight. I stared at him in disbelief. Your parents practically threatened to take our daughter, and you think I escalated it? He dragged a hand through his hair. They wouldn't actually do that. You don't know that. He said nothing. And for the first time since I fell in love with him, I looked at Daniel Mercer and felt like I was sitting beside a stranger. When we pulled into the driveway, Evelyn didn't get out immediately. She looked directly at me. Charlotte, she said quietly, they're not done. Deep down, I already knew she was right. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ava's face at the dinner table when Linda tried to slide the tablet away from her. That expression stayed with me. Not anger. Not even sadness. Fear. The kind of fear children develop when they realize adults can suddenly change the rules without warning. Around 2 a.m, Ava quietly climbed into bed beside me, carrying the tablet against her chest. She didn't say anything. She simply placed it carefully on the nightstand, like it needed protection too. Daniel slept on the far edge of the mattress facing the wall, farther away than he had ever felt. The next morning, I tried convincing myself maybe everything would cool down. Maybe Linda had gone too far and would realize it after sleeping on it. Maybe Mark would talk her down. Maybe Daniel would finally stand up to them. Then my phone rang. Linda. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, Daniel's phone started ringing. He sighed heavily before answering and stepping into the hallway. I could still hear her voice through the speaker. You embarrassed us. Daniel rubbed his forehead. Mom, not right now. That woman had no right speaking to us like that. That woman. Not Evelyn. Not Charlotte's mother. Just that woman. I stepped into the hallway. Put it on speaker. Daniel hesitated. Charlotte. Put it on speaker. Slowly, he did. Linda's voice changed immediately when she realized I could hear her.
Calmer. Sharper.
More controlled. Charlotte, she said smoothly, Mark and I have been talking about Ava. A cold feeling spread through my stomach. Talking about what? We think it might be good for her to stay with us for a little while. I actually laughed once because the alternative was screaming. You're serious? You work 12-hour shifts, Linda continued. Daniel's still trying to stabilize his career situation. That environment isn't ideal for a child. My environment? I asked quietly. You know what I mean. Daniel finally spoke. Mom, we're fine. Your rent was paid by Evelyn last month, Linda snapped. That is not fine. I looked at Daniel sharply. He stared at the floor. So she knew everything. Every struggle. Every embarrassing detail Daniel had apparently shared with them while I worked overtime trying to keep our lives together. Outside interference has become a major issue, Linda continued. Outside interference. That was how she described my mother buying groceries for us. Helping with utilities. Paying for Ava's field trip. If you're implying I can't take care of my daughter, I said carefully, say it directly. A pause. Then Mark's voice joined the call. If necessary, we'll consult someone who can determine what's in Ava's best interest. There it was again. That cold, legal tone. Like they had already rehearsed these conversations together. Daniel finally ended the call. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then he muttered, They're just upset. I stared at him. They threatened us. They didn't mean it literally. How do you know? He opened his mouth, closed it again. That silence told me more than any argument could have. I walked back into Ava's room and found her sitting cross-legged on the floor, drawing little watercolor flowers on her tablet. She looked up nervously. Are Grandma Linda and Grandpa Mark mad at me? No, I said immediately, even though it was partially true. Are they going to make me live there? The question nearly destroyed me. I crouched beside her and touched her hair gently. No one is taking you anywhere. I said it confidently, but for the first time, I wasn't completely sure. By noon, Evelyn was at our front door, carrying coffee and a folder stuffed with paperwork. I told her everything about the call. She didn't look surprised. I've seen people like this before, she said quietly. When they can't control the adults, they go after the child. Daniel sat silently at the kitchen table while she spoke. Evelyn turned directly toward him. You need to decide whose side you're on. There are no sides, he muttered. There are always sides when someone threatens custody. The word hit the room like broken glass. Daniel stood abruptly. No one threatened custody. Your father talked about consulting someone, Evelyn shot back. That is not a casual conversation. Daniel didn't answer. And then, almost like the universe wanted to prove her right immediately, someone knocked on the door. Not casually.
Firmly. Professionally.
Every nerve in my body tightened. Evelyn reached the door first and opened it slowly. A woman stood outside, holding a folder. She introduced herself calmly as a child services caseworker. My blood turned cold instantly. She explained a report had been filed, expressing concern about instability in Ava's home environment.
Financial insecurity. Emotional conflict.
Questions about parental supervision. Linda's words echoed through my head. We'll consult someone. They already had. For a second, I honestly thought I might faint. The social worker remained polite and composed while stepping inside. She glanced around the living room quietly. Ava sat on the carpet with her tablet in her lap. Confused. Small.
Terrified.
"Who is that?" she whispered. I swallowed hard. "Someone making sure everything's okay." The woman interviewed me first, then Daniel, then Ava, privately in her bedroom. While Ava spoke with her, I stood outside the door, feeling physically ill. I kept imagining one wrong sentence, one misunderstood answer, one moment of nervousness from Ava being twisted into evidence against us. Daniel paced constantly. "This is insane," he kept whispering. "My parents overreacted." "Overreacting doesn't usually involve filing reports," I snapped. Evelyn stayed calm, almost frighteningly calm. She had already spread documents across the kitchen table.
Lease agreements.
School records, medical records, attendance reports, utility bills, the receipt for Ava's birthday tablet. Every piece of proof showing our daughter was cared for and loved. The social worker asked me steady, careful questions. Was there food in the home? Yes. Did Ava attend school regularly? Yes. Had there ever been violence inside the home? Absolutely not. Did Ava appear emotionally distressed? Only because adults kept fighting around her. When the woman finally stepped out of Ava's room after nearly 20 minutes, my entire body tensed. "She seems very well cared for," the social worker said gently. "She speaks positively about both of you." Air finally returned to my lungs. But then she added something else. "However, repeated allegations from family members can sometimes trigger extended evaluations."
Repeated.
Meaning Linda and Mark were not planning to stop. Daniel sank into a chair and covered his face with both hands. "I can't believe they actually did this." "I could." That was the horrifying part. The social worker left politely, assuring us the case would likely close quickly if no further concerns appeared. The second the door shut, silence swallowed the house. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Linda. "We are only trying to protect our granddaughter." Protect her from what? From me? From the woman working herself to exhaustion, trying to give her a stable life, while their son drifted between temporary jobs and excuses? I looked at Daniel. Something inside me changed right there. Not anger anymore.
Clarity.
Cold and undeniable. "If you think I'm going to raise Ava under constant threats from your parents," I said quietly, "you're wrong." His eyes widened immediately. "So, what are you saying?" Before I could answer, Evelyn spoke first. "Charlotte and Ava can stay with me for a while." Daniel looked stunned. "That's unnecessary." "Maybe it isn't," Evelyn replied. At that exact moment, Ava walked slowly into the kitchen, clutching the tablet against her chest again. She had clearly overheard enough to understand what was happening. "Are we moving?" she asked softly. I looked at her tiny hands gripping that tablet like it was the only stable thing left in her world. "Maybe temporarily," I whispered. Daniel's voice cracked then. "You're seriously leaving because of this?" I finally looked directly at him. "I'm leaving because your parents tried taking something from our daughter and you stayed silent." He looked away. "When they implied she'd be better off away from me, you hesitated." His jaw tightened. "And when they reported us to child services, you were shocked instead of prepared." "Charlotte, that's not partnership, Daniel." He didn't argue. Maybe because he knew I was right. By evening, 2 suitcases sat near the front door. Ava packed her sketchbooks first, then the tablet charger, then the stuffed rabbit she'd slept with since kindergarten. As I carried the bags outside, headlights slowly rolled past our house. A dark SUV. Linda's SUV. She didn't stop, didn't wave. She just drove slowly enough to let us know she was watching. And in that moment, standing in the cold driveway beside my frightened daughter, I realized something terrifying. Evelyn had been right. They weren't done. But neither was I. Moving into my mother's house was supposed to feel temporary. Instead, it felt like waking up after surviving an accident you didn't realize was happening while it destroyed your life. Evelyn's house sat near the edge of a quiet neighborhood, lined with maple trees and cracked sidewalks. Ava immediately seemed calmer there. She slept through the night again within the first week. Daniel noticed it too. I could see the guilt in his face every time he visited. At first, he came almost every evening, carrying takeout and awkward apologies that never quite became accountability. "I'm trying to talk to them," he kept saying. Talk. As if this situation could still be solved with a calm conversation over coffee. One night, he stood in Evelyn's kitchen while Ava worked on a digital drawing nearby. "She misses home," he said quietly. I looked at him for a long moment. "This is home right now." His shoulders sagged. "You know what I mean." "No. Actually, I didn't anymore." Because the apartment we had shared no longer felt safe in my memory. Every room now carried the feeling of instability, of waiting for another knock on the door. Daniel stepped closer to me. "My parents went too far." That sentence should have comforted me. Instead, it irritated me. "Went too far?" I repeated. "Daniel, they filed a report trying to question our parenting. They thought they were helping." I stared at him in disbelief. "That's still your defense?" His expression changed slightly then. Not angry. Lost. And for the first time, I realized something painful about Daniel Mercer. He had spent his entire life surviving Linda and Mark by surrendering to them, appeasing them, minimizing them, convincing himself their control was normal because accepting the truth would mean admitting they had controlled him too. But I was too exhausted to save him from that realization. A few days later, the first legal email arrived. Mark sent it directly to me. The message was cold, formal, carefully worded. They requested structured visitation with Ava because they were concerned I was intentionally distancing her from extended family support systems. At the bottom sat a lawyer's signature. I read the email twice before handing the phone to Evelyn. She barely reacted. "Good," she said calmly. I blinked. "Good?" Now they're documenting their behavior. That same afternoon, she drove me to meet an attorney. Her name was Patricia Doyle. Sharp eyes, gray blazer, no patience for manipulation. After reading everything, Patricia leaned back slowly. "So let me understand this correctly," she said. "His parents attempted to pressure your daughter into surrendering personal property, implied you were unfit due to finances, filed a questionable report to Child Services, and are now threatening visitation claims?" When she summarized it like that, the insanity became impossible to ignore. "Yes," I said quietly. Patricia nodded once. "They've already damaged their own credibility." For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief. Not safety yet, but direction. The official Child Services investigation closed less than 3 weeks later. The report stated Ava appeared emotionally healthy, academically successful, and securely bonded to both parents. No evidence of neglect. No safety concerns. Case closed. When Patricia read the final statement aloud in her office, I nearly cried from exhaustion alone. But Linda and Mark still refused to stop. 2 days later, they filed for partial visitation rights. Their argument claimed they had maintained significant emotional involvement in Ava's upbringing and feared emotional harm from separation. Patricia actually laughed softly while reading it. "False reports rarely help grandparents in family court," she said. Daniel looked physically ill during mediation. The truth kept surfacing piece by piece, and every new detail made him smaller somehow. Bank statements showed Evelyn had quietly paid nearly half our household expenses during the previous year. Rent assistance, school supplies, utilities, groceries, even Ava's tablet. Meanwhile, Linda had apparently spent months telling relatives she and Mark were financially carrying us. They hadn't contributed $1. Not one. Daniel sat at the mediation table, staring downward, while Patricia calmly dismantled every accusation his parents made. I watched humiliation spread across his face in slow motion. But strangely, I no longer felt satisfaction from it. Only sadness. Because despite everything, part of me still remembered the version of Daniel I fell in love with years earlier. The version who used to dance with Ava in the kitchen when she couldn't sleep. The version who once drove 2 hours at midnight because I casually mentioned craving strawberry pie during pregnancy. That man still existed somewhere, under all the weakness and fear. But not enough to protect us. During one mediation break, Daniel followed me into the hallway. His eyes looked exhausted. I never wanted any of this. I folded my arms tightly. Wanting isn't the same as stopping it. I'm trying now. Now? I whispered. After they threatened custody? After they reported us? His voice cracked. They're still my parents. And Ava is still your daughter. The silence between us felt unbearable. Daniel leaned against the wall like he physically couldn't hold himself upright anymore. I thought if I kept everyone calm, eventually things would settle. That's the problem, I said quietly. You cared more about keeping peace than protecting us. He shut his eyes. Because he knew it was true. The custody hearing itself lasted less than a day. Linda arrived dressed in soft pastel colors, designed to make her appear grandmotherly and harmless. Mark wore a navy suit and the expression of a man still convinced authority naturally belonged to him. Neither of them looked at me directly, but they looked at Ava constantly, like they still believed she was something they could eventually reclaim. Patricia destroyed them gently. That was the terrifying part. Not aggressively. Methodically. She presented the dismissed child services report first. Then the timeline. Then the texts. Then the voicemail transcripts. Then evidence that Linda initiated legal discussions immediately after the tablet incident. The judge's expression hardened more with every document. Finally, Patricia asked the question that shifted the entire room. Mrs. Mercer, she said calmly, can you explain why your first response to disagreement over a child's birthday gift involved discussions about removing that child from her mother's care? Linda's composure cracked for the first time. We were concerned about instability. Instability, Patricia repeated. Or control? Silence. The judge denied their request before the afternoon ended. False allegations.
Manipulative conduct. Insufficient grounds.
Petition denied. Just like that. Outside the courthouse, Linda finally approached Daniel directly. Her voice stayed low, but I still heard every word. You're allowing her to destroy this family. Daniel looked at his mother for a long moment. And something in his face changed. Not strength, exactly. More like grief finally becoming unavoidable. No, he said quietly. You did that. Linda looked stunned. Truly stunned. Like she had never imagined her son would say those words out loud. Mark immediately stepped forward. You don't mean that. But Daniel didn't answer him. He just walked past them toward Ava. She stood beside me, holding my hand tightly. Daniel crouched in front of her carefully. I'm sorry, he whispered. Ava looked at him with heartbreaking seriousness. For what part? The question shattered something inside him completely. I saw it happen in real time. Because there was no single answer anymore. Sorry for the dinner. Sorry for the silence. Sorry for choosing comfort over courage. Sorry for failing her, repeatedly. Daniel's eyes filled instantly, but Ava simply stepped back beside me again. Not cruelly, just cautiously. Like trust had become something fragile now. That night, after everyone finally left, I sat awake beside Evelyn's living room window, staring into darkness. The court victory should have felt triumphant. Instead, I mostly felt tired. Tired of conflict. Tired of fear. Tired of wondering how many quiet compromises had slowly brought us to this point without me noticing. Then, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. I never realized silence could hurt people this much. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I locked the phone without answering. Because finally understanding the damage didn't undo it. And somewhere deep down, I already knew our relationship had quietly ended long before the courtroom ever confirmed it. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning. No dramatic delivery. No screaming argument. Just a plain envelope sitting quietly in Evelyn's mailbox while Ava ate cereal at the kitchen counter, sketching tiny dragons onto her tablet. For a strange moment, I simply stared at the envelope without opening it. Because endings never look the way you imagine they will. I used to think the end of a relationship would sound loud. Doors slamming, crying.
Accusations.
Instead, it sounded like a spoon tapping gently against a cereal bowl while sunlight came through the kitchen curtains. Daniel acted shocked when I officially filed. Even after everything. Even after watching me pack our lives into suitcases and leave. Even after his parents tried using authorities and courts to pressure me into surrendering control over our daughter. He kept insisting we could still fix things. But every time he said it, I realized something painful. Daniel still thought this story began with the custody threats. He never understood it actually began years earlier. With every moment, he chose silence. With every time Ava was compared to Tyler, while he looked away. With every occasion, I became the shield protecting our daughter alone, while he stood behind me, pretending neutrality was harmless. Neutrality is never harmless when someone you love is being diminished. The divorce process moved surprisingly fast after the court denied Linda and Mark's petition. Daniel stopped fighting anything. No arguments over custody. No arguments over property. Almost like part of him finally understood he had already lost something much larger than a marriage. During mediation, he looked exhausted constantly. Older somehow. One afternoon after signing paperwork, he stopped me outside the office building. Rain was falling softly around us. "Charlotte," he said quietly, "I really did love you." I looked at him for a long moment. I know. That was the tragedy of it. Love had never been the problem. Courage was. Ava handled the separation better than I expected. Children understand emotional truth long before adults admit it aloud. One evening, while helping Evelyn fold laundry, Ava looked up at me carefully. "Are Grandma Linda and Grandpa Mark still mad?" I paused before answering. "Probably." She considered that thoughtfully, then nodded once and returned to folding towels. No tears. No panic. Just acceptance. Because children eventually stop expecting safety from people who repeatedly make them feel small. A month later, Evelyn suggested something unexpected. "What if we leave completely?" I looked up from my coffee. "What do you mean?" "There's a clinic hiring near Lake Marion," she said. "Small town, quiet area, better schools." At first, the idea sounded impossible. Then slowly it started sounding like oxygen. Fresh start.
Distance.
Peace. Within 2 months, everything changed. I transferred clinics. Evelyn sold her house. We rented a small blue home near a lake surrounded by pine trees and silence that actually felt peaceful instead of tense. The first night there, Ava stood in her new bedroom, staring out the window at the water. "It's really quiet here," she whispered. Not fearful.
Relieved.
I realized then how much anxiety had become normal for both of us without me noticing. Middle school terrified Ava initially. She worried nobody would like her. Worried she was too shy, too awkward, too quiet. But during the second week, her art teacher submitted one of her digital drawings into a regional student showcase. The piece won honorable mention. When Ava came home holding the certificate, her entire face glowed with a kind of confidence I hadn't seen in years. "You want to see?" she asked excitedly. I spent nearly 15 minutes listening to her explain every tiny detail of the drawing. And halfway through her explanation, I suddenly realized something almost devastating. She was talking freely. No shrinking. No apologizing. No looking over her shoulder, waiting for someone louder to matter more. Daniel called once a week consistently. At first, conversations with Ava stayed awkward and short. But over time, they slowly became easier. Not healed. Just gentler. Sometimes he visited alone. Never with Linda or Mark. Never again. During one visit, I caught him staring silently at Ava while she worked on an art project at the kitchen table. "What?" I asked quietly. He shook his head slowly. I didn't realize how much she stopped talking around them. Neither had I. That truth haunted me. Because once you finally see emotional damage clearly, you start noticing all the moments you missed while it was happening. A few months later, Tyler got accepted into a prestigious university. Linda posted a long emotional message online about sacrifice, family values, and supporting the next generation. Hundreds of people commented about what incredible grandparents she and Mark were. I read the post once, then closed the app. Because for the first time in years, their version of reality no longer had power over me. That was freedom too. Not needing toxic people to admit what they did before allowing yourself to move forward. One evening, near the end of summer, Ava sat at the kitchen table, finishing a digital painting on the same tablet Linda once tried taking away from her. Sunlight reflected softly across the screen while she worked. I stood quietly nearby, pretending to clean, just so I could watch her for a moment. She looked older suddenly. Still gentle. Still artistic. But stronger now. Finally, she glanced up at me. "I'm glad we live here." The words hit me harder than I expected. "So am I," I whispered. Ava smiled softly before returning to her drawing. And as I watched her sitting there, safe and peaceful and unapologetically herself, I understood something that took me years to learn. That dinner was never really about a tablet. It was about testing whether I would allow my daughter to become smaller just to make other people comfortable. Linda and Mark believed silence meant permission. They believed politeness meant weakness. They believed I would keep compromising forever, the way Daniel always had. Instead, they pushed too hard. And in doing so, they accidentally forced me to finally see the truth. Not just about them, about myself. About the kind of mother I wanted to be. About the kind of love a child deserves. Sometimes the worst night of your life is actually the first night you stop abandoning yourself. And sometimes, losing the family you married into is the only reason you finally build the one you and your child truly needed all along. My name is Miranda Foster. I'm 30 years old, and if you had asked me that morning what I was walking into, I would have said dinner. Just dinner. The kind where you sit across from people you've known your entire life and still somehow feel like a guest. When my father raised his glass and said, "To my real legacy," I already felt it. That tight, twisting pull in my chest. The kind that doesn't hurt yet, but promises it will. He turned toward my sister Clara, smiling in that proud, almost glowing way I hadn't seen directed at me in years. She gave me 2 perfect grandchildren. The table responded exactly how it was supposed to. Soft laughter, nods, approval. Clara lit up like she'd just been handed a trophy. Her husband nudged her, smiling like she had just won something. Maybe she had. I didn't laugh. I didn't move. I was sitting 2 seats down, right next to my son Jamie. 10 years old, small for his age, quiet in a way that made people underestimate him, until they actually listened. Which almost no one did. He was staring at his plate, focusing a little too hard on a piece of broccoli, like it required his full attention. I knew that look. He was trying not to feel something. Then, in a voice so soft I almost missed it, he said, "What about me?" Not loud enough to interrupt. Not loud enough to challenge. Just enough to exist. And somehow, that made it worse. I didn't think. I leaned down, kissed the top of his head, and stood up. Glass in hand. No hesitation. I'd like to make a toast too. That got their attention. My father blinked, surprised. Clara's smile held, but barely. I didn't look at them. I looked at Jamie. "This is to my son," I said, steady, calm. "The one who never had to be perfect to deserve love. The one who doesn't need applause to be kind. The one who taught me what real strength looks like, even when no one is paying attention." My voice didn't shake. Not once. The only legacy I will ever care about. Silence. Not polite silence. Not awkward silence. The kind that feels like something just broke, and everyone heard it. My father lowered his glass slowly. His mouth opened like he was about to say something, but nothing came out. Clara froze, her wine glass hovering halfway to her lips. The corners of her smile collapsed so slowly, it almost looked like denial. Someone at the far end of the table muttered something about dessert. No one responded. We left early. Jamie didn't say anything until we were in the car. The streetlights passed over his face in quiet intervals. Then he asked, "Does Grandpa not like me?" I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter than I should have. I said the things people say. He just doesn't show it well. He's old-fashioned. It's not your fault. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were empty. And Jamie knew it too, because this wasn't new. My father had never shown up for him. Not for soccer games. Not for school presentations. Not even for birthdays, unless someone reminded him. But Clara's children? He knew their schedules. Sent them expensive gifts every year. Called them his reason for living. Jamie was an afterthought. And I had spent years pretending that wasn't true. That night, something in me finally stopped pretending. I decided we were done. No more dinners. No more forced smiles. No more teaching my son to sit quietly in rooms where he didn't matter. If that meant cutting my father out completely, then so be it. I didn't explain. I didn't argue. I just stopped answering his calls. And for 6 months, life was quiet, peaceful even. Until one Tuesday morning, my phone rang. The hospital.
Single car accident.
Head trauma.
Internal bleeding.
Possible spinal damage. He may not make it through the night. I sat there, frozen, the phone pressed against my ear long after the call ended. I didn't even realize Jamie was standing in the doorway, watching me. When I told him, he didn't cry. He didn't panic. He just looked unsure. Like he didn't know what someone is supposed to feel for a person who never chose them. I thought about not going, letting Clara handle it. She always handled everything. She'd be there already, taking control, being the perfect daughter. But something didn't sit right. So I packed a bag. One for me, one for Jamie. I didn't call anyone, didn't announce it. I just drove. And when I walked into that hospital waiting room, that's when everything started to crack. Because Clara wasn't there. No one was. And somehow, that was worse than anything I had expected. When I walked into the ICU waiting room, I expected to see Clara pacing near the vending machines. Maybe holding coffee. Maybe crying just enough for people to notice. Maybe already speaking to doctors with that calm, expensive kind of panic she wore whenever life became inconvenient. But the room was almost empty. A man in scrubs slept crookedly in a chair. A nurse typed behind the desk. The television mounted in the corner played some morning show no one was watching. I stepped forward and gave my father's name. The nurse looked up. "You must be Miranda." I nodded. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten. "You're the only family who's come so far." For a second, I thought I had misheard her. "No one else?" She shook her head. "Just you." I looked down the hallway behind her, like Clara might appear if I waited long enough. She didn't. When I entered my father's room, I barely recognized him.
Tubes. Wires.
Machines breathing in strange rhythms around him. His face was bruised, his right arm wrapped, his head shaved in uneven patches where they had operated. He looked smaller. Not powerful. Not proud. Just old.
Fragile. Human.
Jamie stood behind me, silent. I turned to him, ready to tell him he could wait outside. But he shook his head. "I'll stay." So we stayed. All night. No calls. No visits. No Clara. I sat in a hard plastic chair with a paper cup of coffee going cold in my hand, while Jamie slept against my side. Every few minutes, I watched my father's chest rise, then fall, then rise again. In the morning, I called Clara. No answer. I told myself she was with the kids, or driving, or overwhelmed. By noon, I learned the truth had edges. The nurse at the desk mentioned it by accident. "Your sister has been calling for updates," she said, mostly asking about legal things. I turned slowly. "What legal things?" The nurse's expression tightened, like she realized too late she had said too much. She asked whether he had a will on file here. A will. I laughed once. It didn't sound like laughter. It sounded like something inside me snapping. For 3 days, Jamie and I stayed. I brought him snacks from the vending machine, helped him with homework at the tiny table in the corner, let him draw on my tablet when the hours got too heavy. One afternoon, he drew my father sleeping in the hospital bed, wires wrapped around him like vines. Above him, Jamie had drawn a small red heart. I stared at it too long. Why did you add that? I asked. Jamie shrugged without looking up. Because maybe now he loves me a little. I had no answer for that. Clara still didn't come. But her lawyer called. He left a voicemail saying there were documents that needed clarification, that Clara was working hard to protect everyone's interests, that it was important to prevent any unexpected claims. Unexpected claims. Like I was a threat. Like Jamie was a mistake someone needed to erase before paperwork became inconvenient. I deleted the voicemail without telling Jamie. I just kept showing up. I held my father's hand when his blood pressure dropped. Read quietly when the room felt too full of machines. Sat in silence when there was nothing left to say. The doctors warned me that even if he woke up, things might not be simple.
Memory loss. Confusion.
Possible impairment. I nodded through all of it, but the truth was, I didn't know what I was hoping for. On the fourth night, around 3 a.m, everything changed. Jamie was curled in the recliner, beneath a thin hospital blanket. I was half awake, watching the green pulse line on the monitor. Then my father's fingers twitched. At first, I thought I imagined it. Then his eyes opened. Only for a second. But they opened. He looked around the room, dazed and terrified, like he had surfaced somewhere he didn't understand. His eyes found me, then shifted to Jamie. He blinked slowly. His lips moved. I leaned closer. His voice was dry, broken, barely there. Miranda. One word. My name. And in that moment, I knew something had changed. Not just in him. In the entire story Clara had been preparing to tell. Because he had woken up. And I had been there. When my father said my name, it didn't sound like recognition at first. It sounded like confusion. Like he was reaching for something just out of his grasp. I stepped closer to the bed, careful not to disturb the wires or the rhythm of the machines. I'm here, I said quietly. It's okay. His eyes moved slowly, unfocused at first, then sharper. They landed on me, stayed there, then shifted. To Jamie. There was a pause. A long one. He stared at him like he was trying to place him. Like he was looking at someone he should have known, but didn't. Jamie didn't speak. He just gave a small nod. Not demanding. Not hurt. Just allowing. That kind of grace didn't come from children easily. I pressed the call button, and within seconds the room filled with movement. Nurses. Doctors. Voices layered over one another. We were asked to step outside while they checked his vitals. I didn't want to leave, but I did. Out in the hallway, I finally looked at my phone. Still nothing from Clara. But there was a new voicemail. Different number. Male voice.
Come. Professional.
He introduced himself as one of my father's attorneys and said he needed to speak with all next of kin immediately. I didn't call back. Not yet. An hour later, we were allowed back into the room. My father was awake. Not strong. Not steady. But awake. A doctor explained the surgery had gone better than expected. There might be some cognitive effects, but he was responsive. Then, almost casually, he added, "He's been asking who's been here." I didn't respond. Jamie didn't either. We just walked in. My father was trying to sit up when we entered. The nurse adjusted his bed and left us alone. I expected questions. About Clara. About his house. About everything that had always mattered to him. But instead, he looked at me and asked, "Why are you here?" Not harsh. Not cold. Just, genuinely confused. I held his gaze. Because you're my father. He stared at me longer than I expected, like he was trying to rebuild something inside his mind. Then he asked, "Where's Clara?" There it was. I didn't hesitate. She hasn't been here. His brow furrowed. That's not possible. I reached for the visitor log sitting at the nurse's station just outside and brought it back. Flipped through the pages, set it in front of him. Look. Dates. Times. Names. Mine. Jamie's.
Staff.
That was it. His eyes moved across the pages slowly, then stopped. His jaw tightened. He didn't argue again. He just leaned back into the pillow and closed his eyes. He didn't speak much for the rest of the day. But something had shifted. That night, he asked Jamie if he could draw something for him. Anything, he said. Jamie hesitated, then nodded. He drew a tree. Strong trunk. Deep roots. And under it, in careful letters, he wrote, "We're still here." My father stared at that drawing for a long time. Longer than he had ever looked at anything Jamie had made before. The next morning, Clara finally arrived. Not alone. She walked in with her lawyer. Perfect hair. Tailored blazer. Phone already in her hand. Like this was another appointment she needed to manage. Her lawyer followed half a step behind, holding a slim briefcase. She stopped when she saw me. Then Jamie. Something flickered across her face. Not shock. Not guilt.
Calculation.
"Dad," she said, stepping forward. "Oh my God, I was so worried." He didn't respond immediately. He just watched her. The same way he had watched Jamie. Like he was seeing something clearly for the first time. Her lawyer cleared his throat and introduced himself. Then began talking. Medical directives. Power of attorney. Legal responsibilities. His voice was smooth. Detached. Like this was routine. Like the man in the bed wasn't still recovering from nearly dying. That was when my father lifted his hand. Weak. Shaking. But deliberate. "Stop." The room went quiet. A different kind of quiet this time. Heavy.
Controlled.
He looked at Clara. "Where were you?" She blinked. "I had the kids. Hospitals are hard for them. I've been calling constantly." "How many times did you come here?" She didn't answer. Her eyes flicked to her lawyer. That was enough. "The doctors told me everything," he said, voice low but steady. About who was here when I couldn't breathe properly. About who was here when I woke up and didn't understand where I was. His eyes moved. To Jamie. Then to me. "You were here." Not a question.
A statement.
Clara let out a small, nervous laugh. "That's not exactly accurate. Hospital records can be unreliable, and I've been extremely busy making sure everything is handled properly." "Everything?" he repeated. Her lawyer stepped in. "Your daughter has been ensuring your estate is protected, that your intentions are respected." "My intentions?" my father cut in, sharper now. The lawyer hesitated. Clara stepped forward. "I was just being practical." That was the moment something inside him hardened. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, the softness was gone. "Did you already start moving things?"
Silence.
"Did you assume I wasn't coming back?" "Dad, that's not—" "Leave." The word landed flat.
Clear. Final.
Clara blinked, then laughed again, like she hadn't heard him correctly. Dad, stop! You're confused. You've just had surgery. I said leave. No one moved. Not me. Not Jamie. Not the nurse who had quietly stepped into the doorway. Clara looked around, waiting for someone to intervene. No one did. Security arrived a few minutes later.
Calm.
Professional. They escorted her lawyer first, then her. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She just stared at me, like I had taken something that belonged to her. After the door closed, the room felt different.
Quieter.
Lighter. My father looked at me, then at Jamie. I'm sorry, he said. Not rushed, not defensive. Slow. Heavy. Real. And for the first time in my life, I believed him. 2 days later, I got a call from his financial advisor. My father wanted to meet. Not with him. With me. Jamie was asleep in the recliner when I left the hospital room. The nurses promised to keep an eye on him. The advisor met me in a quiet office nearby. He looked uncomfortable, like he knew what he was about to show me would change things. He slid a thick folder across the desk. Inside, accounts, property deeds, trust funds, an updated will. Clara's name was everywhere. Joint accounts, the house she lived in, education funds for her children,
Investments.
everything. My name appeared twice. Once as next of kin, once on an old emergency contact form. That was it. I didn't need him to explain. Clara hadn't just been favored. She had been positioned.
Prepared.
And when the accident happened, she moved. I looked up. Can this be changed? He nodded slowly. If your father is deemed mentally competent. That evaluation happened the next day. My father passed every test. Slower than before, but sharp.
Clear. Present.
When the advisor returned with a notary, my father didn't hesitate. He changed everything. Removed Clara from the accounts. Reclaimed the house. Dissolved the trusts. Revoked the power of attorney she had tried to activate. When the advisor asked who he wanted to assign instead, he looked at me. I don't want it, I said immediately. He shook his head. This isn't about you. His eyes moved. To the doorway. Jamie had just walked in, holding 2 bags of chips from the vending machine. It's about him. And just like that, the definition of legacy began to change. The new documents were signed that afternoon.
Quietly.
No announcements. No dramatic speeches. Just ink on paper. Correcting something that had been leaning in the wrong direction for years. My father gave me full medical and financial power of attorney. A modest trust was created in Jamie's name. The rest, his accounts, his properties, everything he had built, would remain his for the rest of his life. With one condition. If anything happened to him, Clara would receive nothing. It didn't feel like revenge. Not really. It felt like something being set back into place. Like a scale finally balancing after being tilted for too long. That weekend, my father was discharged. He didn't ask to go home. He asked to come with us. I don't want to be there, he said quietly. Not anymore. I studied him for a long moment. Then I nodded. You can stay, I said, but it won't be the same. He didn't argue. He just said, I know. The day he moved in, he brought almost nothing with him. A duffel bag. A few books. No expectations. No authority. Just presence. At first, everything felt unfamiliar. Like we were all learning how to exist in a space that didn't have a script. He spent most of his time at the kitchen table, watching Jamie draw, asking questions, small ones. What's your favorite subject? What do you like to watch? What are you working on now? He stumbled sometimes, over simple things, things he should have known years ago. But the difference was, he stayed, he listened, and for the first time, it didn't feel forced. One night, after Jamie had gone to bed, my father sat across from me in the living room. The lamp between us cast a soft, uneven light. "Why didn't you give up on me?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. Because the truth wasn't simple. I didn't want him to learn what I learned, I said finally. I didn't want Jamie to grow up thinking silence is normal, or that people don't change. He looked down at his hands. I didn't deserve that kind of patience. No, I said honestly, you didn't. The words didn't hurt him. He nodded like he accepted them, like he needed to. After that, something shifted again. He started writing letters. Not to me. To Jamie. Short notes. Folded neatly. Left under his bedroom door every few days. At first, Jamie didn't say much. He would pick them up quietly. Read them alone. But one afternoon, I walked past his room and saw them taped inside his closet door. One next to the other. Like something worth keeping. Like something that mattered. Weeks passed. Then, one day, without thinking, Jamie said it. "Grandpa, can you look at this?" The word hung in the air for a second. My father froze, then slowly looked up and smiled. Not the proud, performative smile I remembered. Something softer. Something real. Clara tried to fight it. Of course she did. Her lawyer sent letters.
Accusations.
Claims of manipulation.
Coercion.
Even elder abuse. But the medical reports were clear. The process had been clean. No pressure. No confusion. Just decisions made by a man who had finally seen things clearly. She showed up once. At my apartment. Didn't knock. Just stood in the hallway, waiting. I saw her through the peephole. So did Jamie. We didn't open the door. She stayed for 20 minutes, then left. That was the last time I saw her. A few months later, my father asked to host a dinner. "Nothing big," he said. "Just something small." I hesitated. Then agreed. The night came quietly. No decorations. No perfect table setting. Just simple food on mismatched plates. Jamie talked about a comic book he was drawing. My father listened like it was the most important thing he had ever heard. Asked questions. Remembered details. Stayed present. At the end of the night, he reached for his glass. Apple cider this time. Not wine. He looked at Jamie, then at me, and said, "To my real legacy." The words landed differently now. Not heavy. Not sharp.
Steady.
Not in bloodlines, not in property, but in patience, in kindness, in second chances. I didn't cry, but Jamie smiled. And that was enough. The house Clara thought she would inherit is no longer hers. My father turned it into something else.
A scholarship program.
in Jamie's name. For children like him. Quiet.
Overlooked.
Brilliant in ways people don't always notice. Clara never saw it coming. She thought legacy was something you owned, something you claimed. But it isn't. It's something you build, or lose, or if you're lucky, something you get a second chance to understand. And now, that legacy lives here, in this house, in these small, quiet moments, in Jamie, and maybe in the version of my father who finally chose to stay.